Good evening, members and members of the public and any of the press attending this full council meeting. BCP Council, it's 11th of February 2025. I'm Councillor Leslie Dedman, and as Chairman of the BCP Council, I will be chairing the meeting, supported by the Vice Chair, Councillor Simon Bull. I want to make an apology straight off because I've got a head cold and ear problems, so if you can't hear me, I'm very sorry, but I hope you can. I might not be able to hear you, but that's different. Okay, I'm now going to set out the housekeeping arrangements for this meeting, and please note that the meeting will be recorded by the Council for live and subsequent broadcast and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. In order to ensure this meeting is managed effectively, please could everybody follow the ground rules. If you wish to speak, please raise your hand clearly. Where there appears to be consensus in the meeting for a motion, I will ask if there is dissension. When a formal vote is required, this will be carried out by a show of hands unless a recorded vote is requested, which requires support from a quarter of the members present at this meeting. And please could members indicate to me if they are leaving the meeting. And in accordance with the Constitution, we will allow for comfort breaks as appropriate. And it would be helpful if you avoid leaving the meeting actually during a debate. Points of order raised should state the applicable constitutional provision. And as always, I shall assume that all councillors uphold the highest standards of conduct during our meeting and treat one another with courtesy and consideration. And as a reminder, this is a meeting being held in public but not a public meeting. Public are in attendance to observe the proceedings and the debate, but must remain silent throughout all the items. Agenda item 1, apologies. Chief Executive, can you read out the apologies for this meeting, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies have been received from Councillor Julie Bagwell, Councillor Judes Butt, Councillor John Challoner, Councillor Joe Clements, Councillor George Farquhar, Councillor Anne Filer, Councillor Paul Hilliard, Councillor Judy Richardson and Councillor Lawrence Williams.
Yes, Councillor Hadley, have you got an apology to make?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, Councillor Mark Howell, apologies.
Thank you, Mark Howell. I think that's all the apologies unless we have any others. Thank you. So, thank you. Oh, don't worry, Councillor Hannah. Item 2, declarations of interest. Now, the monitoring officer has granted all BCP councillors a dispensation to enable all to fully and freely participate in the debate relating to all aspects of the budget setting for this forthcoming year and the council tax base. And the granting of this dispensation will be reported to the next meeting of the Standards Committee. Agenda item 3, confirmation of the minutes. Councillors, you've all had the minutes of meetings 10th of December 2024 and 15th of January 2025. Do you agree to confirm the minutes of those meetings? Thank you, councillors. We're agreeing by consensus. Thank you. Agenda item 4. It's with great sadness that I report the death of former councillor Bob Williams. Bob Williams sat on Poole Borough Council from 1996 to 2003, and he represented Broadstone. And I believe Councillor Vicky Slade is going to say a few words. Councillor Slade.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's my sad job today to formally pay tribute to my friend and mentor, Bob Williams, who served as a councillor from 1986 to 2003, firstly on Dorset County Council, where he was Chair of Planning, and then after Borough of Poole was formed, as Deputy Leader representing Creekmore and then Broadstone. Despite being born in Hampshire, Bob was a Poole man through and through, having arrived in the town aged just 4. He talked of his idyllic childhood and seemed to thrive in the somewhat boisterous surroundings of Kent Welch, where he excelled at sport. A thoroughly practical man, Bob qualified as an electrician and left Poole for pretty much the only time in his life when he emigrated with his wife Sheila to Australia in 1963. But the call of Dorset was too strong and he returned in 1965, remaining here for the rest of his life with Sheila and bringing up Christian and Kerry, and spending his career at Barclays as an engineer. He was life president of Mid Dorset and North Poole, Lib Dems, having been chair multiple times. First elected to Dorset Council, according to our records, was the 3rd registered member of our Liberal Democrats after Annette and Mike Brooke, although at that time we weren't Liberal Democrats, we were other things. He was chair of Dorset Planning, helped secure the World Heritage Site of Jurassic Coast and protected our heathlands at Camford Heath, became deputy leader of Borough of Poole and got the Holes Bay Road and Broadstone Bypass built, along with the commissioning of the infamous twin sails. After he lost his seat in 2003, I realised he had time on his hands, so I asked him to be the Secretary of the Chamber of Trade. He became a mentor to me, having been a key part of Annette's team in 2001. And it was after one of the Chamber of Trade meetings that he asked me to stand, after I'd commented on the poor quality of one of our councillors and asked when we would get rid of them. He said, "When you agree to stand." And I often reminded him of this exchange, the most recent being in October at our last AGM, and I'm so glad that I did. As well as the Secretary of the Chamber, he became the voice of the Broadstone Christmas Parade and the Fun Days, and more recently was a committed member of Broadstone Choir. So I have Bob to thank for my time in politics. I'm not the only person here who has him to thank. He was a quiet, practical and humble man. He was one of the best, and we shall miss him very much.
Thank you, Councillor Slade. Clearly we have a lot to thank him for. Members, I'm going to ask those of us who can to stand just for a moment in silent tribute. Thank you. Thank you, members. Members, this meeting is reserved for budget matters, so it's proposed to update members on engagements myself and the Vice Chairman have attended at the next meeting, which is on the 25th of February. So we move on to agenda item 5, public issues. Are there any petitions, questions or statements? No, there are none, members. Right, we're on to recommendations from the Cabinet and the other committees. The Council is asked to consider the recommendations at items 6 to 8, and they're going to be taken separately as set out on the agenda. And I must highlight that there are decisions on some of these issues which have been taken under delegated powers by the relevant bodies and are therefore not before this Council. So item 6, Cabinet 15th of January 2025, minute number 101, Council tax base 2025 to 26. Councillor Mike Cox, I understand that you're going to move this recommendation, and then Councillor Andy Martin will second the move. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, I'd like to move the recommendation that's on the Council's order papers that It has to be said that this is probably one of the most technical and, dare I say, a bit boring reports that are likely to come to Council tonight. But nevertheless, it is very important as it sets out the council tax base, which is fundamental to deciding how much council tax is to be charged to each and every resident. This year's council tax base has been calculated as 151,574.2, which actually is an increase from last year of 5,232.2, or 3.5% increase. The vast majority of this increase, 87%, comes from the second home's premium. If there is significant unintended consequences as a result of this policy, there may be a detrimental effect on BCP's revenue. But apart from that, I'd just like everybody to approve that, because we need that in order to pass the council tax. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. Excuse me. Councillor Andy Martin, are you going to second?
Yes, happy to second and reserve my right, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Right. Any councillors who wish to speak on minute 101? You've got the 3 minutes. Do I have any speakers? That looks like a no. Okay, thank you. In that case, the proposer can sum up. Well, no, hang on. So sorry. Councillor Martin, you've reserved your right. Do you want to speak?
I think not, thank you.
Okay, right. Thank you, Councillor Cox. To sum up, please.
Thank you. I'll let it lie there and hope everybody will support it. Thank you.
Right. So we're going to try for the consensus here then. Is there a consensus to accept this? Agreed. Thank you. That's a consensus. Thank you. Thank you, members. Now, item 7 is the Audit and Governance Committee of the 27th of January 2025, minute number 63. Treasury Management Monitoring Report for the period April to December 2024 and Treasury Management Strategy 2025 to 26. I believe Councillor Marcus Andrews is going to move the recommendation, with Councillor Connolly seconding, Eleanor Connolly seconding the move. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. Firstly, can I mention a typo that needs to be corrected? On page 47, the table which follows immediately after table 3 should, of course, be table 4, not table 5. And also should refer to long-term borrowing, not short-term borrowing. I will thank Councillor Vicky Slade for spotting that. Obviously, she hasn't got enough documents to read at the moment. She spotted it at the committee meeting. So, at the Audit and Governance meeting on the 27th of January, the committee was presented with the Treasury Management Strategy 25-26. The Treasury Management Strategy is produced each year in accordance with the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy, CIFRA, Code of Practice on Treasury Management. It sets out how the Council's Treasury Service will support capital investment decisions and how Treasury Management operates day to day. It also sets out the limitations on Treasury Management activity through prudential indicators within the Council's Treasury function must operate. The contribution the Treasury Management function makes to the authority is critical, as the balance of debt and investment operations ensure liquidity or the ability to meet spending commitments as they fall due, either day-to-day revenue or for larger capital projects. The Treasury operations will see a balance of the interest costs of debt and the investment income arising from cash deposits affecting the available budget. Since the cash balances generally result from reserves and balances, it's paramount to ensure adequate security of the sums invested, as a loss of the principal will in effect result in a loss to the general fund balance. It's important to note the importance of Treasury management and the continued pressure on BCP Council's dedicated school grant deficit is having on the budget. The strategy makes provision for the growing deficit and how it will be able to maintain the position for another year until the government sets out a sustainable solution. The Council will utilise temporary borrowing within its agreed debt headroom and not through a capitalisation directive. And Councillor Connolly will second.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Councillor Eleanor Connolly. Sorry, I'm slurring your name here, Eleanor. Thank you.
I'm happy to second, but reserve my right to comment.
Right, councillors. Minute 63, you can speak for up to 3 minutes. Do I have any speakers?
Councillor Armstrong.
Sorry? Who? Oh, I'm so sorry. Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you, Chair. I don't think this will come as what I'm about to say. I don't think it will be a surprise to members of Audit and Governance. So on the 16th of July 2019, Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole Council declared a climate and ecological emergency, and we pledged to make the council's operations carbon neutral by 2030. However, this commitment we do not feel is currently reflected within the Council's Treasury management policy or in its approach to employer pension fund contributions. Despite our pledges, public funds, whether through Treasury investments or employer pension contributions, may still be linked to industries that harm people and the planet, including fossil fuels, arms manufacturing and companies with poor human rights records, and this really needs to change. To align our financial practices with our declared commitments and provide residents with a clear guarantee that their money is not funding harm, we believe that the Council should divest from fossil fuels, arms sales and companies linked to human rights abuses, ensuring that public money is not used to bankroll activities that contradict our ethical and climate goals. We need to adopt an ethical investment strategy that prioritises sustainability, renewable energy, biodiversity protection and social impact initiatives. And we need to ensure that our employer pension contributions are invested responsibly, working with our pension fund managers to transition away from harmful industries towards ethical and sustainable options. If BCP claims to take climate action seriously, it cannot continue to risk bankrolling destruction. A council that represents the residents must ensure that their money is not funding war, environmental devastation or exploitation. So I think it's time to demonstrate that public funds are not inadvertently being used to fund the industries or governments that drive the climate crisis and global suffering. And we must act now to divest, reinvest and ensure that every pound of public money supports a sustainable and ethical future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Beasley.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. If I might just say, as a member of the Dorset County Pension Fund, and its former chairman, I have given an assurance at the Audit and Governance meeting that I would give an update on the issues that have just been raised, and that I will happily do. I have it in draft on my laptop. The question is, do I send it just to members of Audit and Governance, or would it be better if I do as I've done before and send it to all members of the Council? I think for information it probably would put aside a number of the concerns that have just been expressed, Madam Chairman.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Beasley. That would be helpful to all councillors. Thank you. More speakers?
Councillor Broadhead.
Councillor Broadhead.
Thank you for the wry smile, Madam Chairman. Madam Chairman, I will be reluctantly abstaining on this particular item. The Chairman of the Audit and Governance Committee just gave a brief introduction of the fact that the Council will be borrowing, I think, £60 million as part of its efforts to tackle the situation with the high needs block in order to avoid a capitalisation direction. Now, my points on this have been well trailed in both the Audit and Governance Committee and the Overview and Scrutiny Board, but I still have deep reservations with this approach, whilst it would never be good for the Council to take a capitalisation direction. Neither this council nor any preceding councils have ever taken a capitalisation direction. The benefit of that would be binding the government into a solution on what is a very existential threat to the council. And I think undertaking that eye-watering amount of borrowing, £60 million to clarify, on the hope and the prayer that government are going to fix this and potentially bail us out in the future, I just think is a little bit too risky. So unfortunately, I will be abstaining. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Broadhead. Councillor Phipps, you indicated.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'm also on Audit and Governance, and also at that meeting, I did abstain on this item. So I will also to be consistent, be doing that this evening. I've been on Audit and Governance now for some years, and I have never once voted to increase the debt threshold of this council. When this administration first took office or was elected, the current administration, we did reduce the debt threshold of this council, and I did vote for that. But this proposal within this Treasury report is to yet again increase the debt threshold of the council. I can't support that, I'm afraid. I think we're in enough trouble as we are. I also don't think we can rely on this government. It has no money at the moment and is very unlikely to have any next year to bail us out of this. It does say in the Section 151 Officers' Report, in the next item, that the only sustainable way is to just go with our allocation and spend our allocation and not take on the debt. It doesn't quite say that, and I can give you the actual quote. But I'm afraid, have to abstain on this item. Thank you.
Councillor Cox, did you want to come in?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I just wanted to say that we have applied for a capitalisation directive in the past. We didn't take it because we sold property instead, but we have applied and we had accepted capitalisation directive. And we wanted to avoid a capitalisation directive like the plague for reasons that I'll come on to later on. I just wanted to say, particularly to Councillor Broadhead, that we have reduced the amount we're borrowing from 1.3 billion, which is what he wanted for us to borrow, down to a considerably amount less than that. And so I really don't see the issue with borrowing £60 million to actually provide a service which the government has directed us to provide, albeit significantly, it's costing us significantly more than the money that they're giving us. As you can see in the papers later on, the government have actually written to us. We've demanded that they write to us, and they've written to us to say that that is their recommendation. We've also spoken to the auditor and SIPFA, and they have also stated in writing, which is in the confidential addendum to the cabinet reports, that they think this is our best and only option. So I would strongly recommend that Council, if they want to see children's services maintained in the future, then they actually need to vote for this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. Do we have any more speakers before Councillor Connolly comes in? Councillor Connolly, then, as you seconded.
Yeah, thank you. On the substance of it, I think Councillor Andrews summarised everything. I won't go into that. With respect to Councillor Armstrong, if there are particular investments for which we would like to consider replacing with ESG-type products instead, and would like to work on a strategy with that, I'd be open to talking about that, but we would need to think about that in the constraints of what is permitted under local government finance. So I'd be happy to talk about where we could look at ESG products instead. To Councillor Broadhead, we did get a capitalisation directive, we just didn't have to draw on it in the end, but that's why we had to go through the best value notice process, and as a result, and we want to avoid doing that again. But ultimately, we need to keep funding the pupils with high needs, either through a capitalisation directive or through the borrowing. Either way, it falls on us. The pros and cons have been deliberated on, but there's no shying away from that need. So we are where we are with that block. It's not, this is not a short-term problem. This has been long in the making. So with that, happy to second the overall package.
Thank you, Councillor Connolly. Councillor Andrews, would you like to sum up before we go to the vote?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, noting Councillor Armstrong's comments, she did make them at the committee. Dorset pension funds do obviously invest considerable sums of money for BCP pensions, and if Councillor Beasley could organise, perhaps through Democratic Services, circulating that information when you have it available, that would be fantastic. What I would say is this council does lend and borrow money. It's all in the report as to who we lend and borrow money to, short-term loans and things like that. But they are principally other councils, police or fire authorities, so I'm sure they're not involved in wars or similar things abroad at all. In terms of Councillor Broadhead, I note he's not happy with borrowing to support SEND. That's obviously a difference in terms of finding the money. Obviously, Councillor Cox has explained the current administration wants to do the £60 million borrowing. Councillor Phipps, again, yes, you did make your comments at the committee very, very clear, but we do have a very difficult financial position that we're in, and we need to move on. And Councillor Connolly, thank you for your contribution. I concur with what you said. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Members, are you content to vote with a show of hands? Right. So, all in favour, hands up, please. Not Simon, I don't think. Okay. Thank you. Those members against? Members abstaining? Right, thank you, members. That was carried. Right, we move on to item 8, recommendations from the Cabinet of 5th of February 2025. There are 4 budget-related items from this Cabinet meeting held on the 5th of February with recommendations to the Council, and you've had them circulated to you as a supplementary paper for this evening's Council meeting. So that's minute number 113. Council Budget Monitoring 2024 to 25 at Q3. Councillor Mike Cox, I understand you'll move the motion, the recommendation, and Councillor David Brown will second. Thank you. So, Councillor Cox, please.
Madam Chair, thank you. I formally move this. The only thing that Council needs to decide upon is to agree the acceptance of a capital grant for the HRA detailed in Appendix D, paragraph 20. So according to the financial regulations, Council is requesting that they accept the Homes England capital grant of 2.97 million and realign the funding streams as proposed in the table. Thank you.
Councillor Brown, would you like to second, please?
Yes, Chair, I'm happy to second and reserve my right to speak.
Councillors, who wishes to speak? It's minute 113. I don't see anybody. So, are we in consensus that we accept this? Yes, thank you. Thank you, that's passed. Moving on to minute 117, Early Years and Mainstream Schools Funding 2025 to 26. Councillor Richard Burton, I understand you'll move the recommendations, and Councillor Andy Martin will second this move. Thank you, Councillor Burton.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. I'll keep this short. I went into a lot of detail at Cabinet. The whole of this is a very regulated area. The Dedicated School Grant, so the DSG, is money spent by government on education. Total estimated for 25-26 is about 405 million. The amount level is mainly based on pupil numbers. There's two parts of the decision tonight. The early years funding formula, detailed in Appendix 1. There's no complications here with this bit. And the second bit is the mainstream schools funding formula, which is detailed in Appendix 2. I'll say a little bit around this. Things have become slightly simpler since the paper was published, in that we have a decision from the Secretary of State which says that we cannot transfer the 1% or the 0.5% from the schools block to the high needs block, so all of that option will be is removed. This transfer was to fund the Innovation Fund, which would help mainstream schools provide more support for pupils with SEND at a cost of about 2.8 million. The Schools Forum was keen on this happening. This year we are left with a transfer of the surplus from the schools block of 0.4%, which was agreed at the Schools Forum, which is 1.1 million. The budget paper says that the Innovation Fund will be implemented only to the extent that funding has been secured, so we have a shortfall on this. It doesn't affect the decision tonight, but it's something that we will be exploring coming on. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Councillor Andy Martin, are you seconding, please?
I am, Chair, and I'll reserve my right. Thank you.
Members, do we have a debate on this? Right, in that case, and I should have asked Councillor Brown this previously, I'm so sorry. If you've reserved your right, Councillor Martin, do you wish to speak now?
No, I don't think there's anything to add. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Burton, do you wish to sum up? Thank you.
Again, I don't think there's anything for me to add, Chair.
Thank you, councillors. Right. Can we have a consensus vote on this one then, please? All in favour? Thank you. Thank you. Minute number 114, Housing Revenue Account, budget setting 2025 to 26. Councillor Kieran Wilson, I understand you'll move this recommendation and Councillor Sandra Moore will second. Thank you, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to present the Housing Revenue Account budget paper, which is a separate account within the Council's budget that ring-fences the income and expenditure associated with our council housing. This paper sets out proposals regarding increases to rents, service charges and other charges to tenants and leaseholders. Arrangements for these increases are separate to arrangements for increasing fees elsewhere in the council and are set out in law and regulation. In terms of regulatory and quality standards, we have a number of topics both on the horizon and facing us immediately in the short term. New building and fire safety regulations following on from the Grenfell tragedy, much needed and improved consumer regulation and complaint handling across the sector, the decarbonisation of our stock, which will cost an astronomical figure to do well, and we will need a substantial government investment in order to do that. Decent home standards, damp and mould, inflation across the board, including the cost of services. And as well as that, we have the national rent setting policy, which is coming to the forefront, which will determine how much income we can generate in order to meet these challenges. And you can find our response to the government's consultation on this at Appendix 7. But the headline is, whilst we welcome the suggested longer period of 5 years in a settlement, 10 years would give us more stability, and that CPI +1 increases per year in rents alone will not allow us to meet the challenges that I have just mentioned. The income from over 10,000 rented and leasehold properties we generate is in the region of 54 million. With service charges and a few other things, we have a total income of 58 million. This report is all about how we spend that in the best possible way, and it is so important that we spend it in the best possible way, in line with our tenants' expectations and need. And I believe that this budget does that. This budget allows for additional staff costs for complaint handling, better management of our antisocial behaviour, and improving resident involvement. All key areas within the new consumer standard, but much more importantly, all key areas our residents want to see investment in. There is also additional staff required if we want to provide assurance in areas such as property compliance, performance, and more general aspects of business and commercial running of the HRA. Proposals are currently being developed for this. It is not yet known the exact cost of what it will be. However, the budget has been increased by 615,000 to ensure that any requirements for additional staff can be funding. Something we have not done previously, but we have done in this budget, is put £100,000 towards community projects for our tenants, which we'll be working with them to see how they want that spent. An additional £1 million has been made available through the capital expenditure for planned maintenance to move towards EPCC across our stock, which we previously had no budget for. This is a bit of a transitional budget as we develop our 30-year business plan, which I'm excited to bring forward in the next financial year. But I think it addresses a lot of key issues for our residents and our tenants, and it's really important. So I would like to thank the Director of Housing and Communities and the Head of BCP Homes for their work on this, and I'm happy to put forward the paper as set out. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Moore, are you to second?
Yes, I'm happy to second, Chair, but I've nothing to add. Thank you.
Right, members, do we have any debate here? Councillor Joe Salmon.
Sorry, I just wanted to check Kieran, because one of the recommendations that came out of Adult Health and Social Care ONS was that there was a need for a solution to be developed for the rough sleepers who are found with no local connection. And I just wondered if that was something that was being budgeted for in what's been set out here, or if maybe I've got that in the wrong place, but I think it maybe sits here.
Councillor Wilson, I don't know if that was a question or not really.
Sorry, if that was a question, do I need to say this is a question before I say it?
Well, I don't know if... Councillor Wilson, do you wish to answer now or later? Councillor Hadley.
Thank you. Yes, I really welcome the investment in energy efficiency for our social housing stock. It's really important that people who have the least means to pay for energy are supported and are provided with warm homes and mould-free homes, and this helps to achieve that. Thank you.
Do I have any more speakers before Councillor Moore comes back in? Councillor Moore, then, if you've reserved your right. No, right. Councillor Wilson, do you want to sum up? Thank you.
Yeah, I suppose just to answer Councillor Salmon's query, it would sit in the more general fund budget that we're about to debate in the next item, but there is an allocation of around 60,000 to deal with that issue, and we'll be kind of working out a plan on how to spend that in terms of dealing with rough sleepers who have no local connection. So, thank you.
Thank you, councillors. Do we have a consensus on minute 114? In agreement. Thank you. Thank you. Right. So we are now moving right on to minute number 112, budget 2025 to 26, and the medium-term financial plan. Now, I've agreed for this item that the speaking times will be as follows. Combined up to 15 minutes for the proposer and seconders of the budget, obviously worked out between them. Combined up to 10 minutes for proposers and seconders of the alternative budget. 5 minutes for opposition group leaders and Councillor Bartlett as chair of the Overview and Scrutiny Board. And then all other speakers have our usual 3 minutes. 3 minutes for councillors summing up. So I hope we've all grasped that. You can always ask again. And the leaders of the groups, as I have it in my notes, are Councillor Broadhead, Councillor Canavan, Councillor Rigby, and Councillor Judy Butt, who is not here. So I don't know if anybody's taking that. No? No, okay. Right. No, okay. Righty-ho. So now we'll move into this straight away. Councillor Mike Cox, I understand that you're going to move this recommendation, and then Councillor Andy Martin will second this move, and as I said, you have 15 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair and fellow councillors. I want to really start by thanking Adam Richins and his team, led by Nicola Webb and Matt Filmer, for the huge amount of work that they put into this budget, the report and the appendices. It is a mammoth task, not helped, of course, by the usual last-minute changes from the central government. I believe it is recognised across this council that it's been one of the most open and transparent budget processes to date, involving extensive public consultation, engagement with partners and the business community, and detailed scrutiny by the Overview and Scrutiny Committees. This year's budget is a story in two parts. On the one hand, we have the abomination, which is the funding for our SEND services. Government demanding that councils keep deficits off balance sheet while deliberately underfunding a statutory service is deceitful, it's dishonest, and it's a disgrace. It would not be permitted in any other sector. As outlined in this report, the proverbial Rubicon has been crossed at BCP, with the accumulated deficit from SEND now beginning to dwarf the Council's own reserves. Since May 2024, we've been begging central government for advice on what to do about our cash flow issue. It took months for them to even understand what the cash flow issue could be. We lobbied MPs, we've lobbied ministers and the LGA. We put forward our own suggestions of the ways we could make SEND expenditure meet the income provided. All unacceptable, including the withholding of the government's share of the business rates. The only so-called tool in the box, which might have been used, was the capitalisation direction, a solution for councils who have made bad decisions in the past, something like selling off our own beach huts. We fought back hard, demanding if this was the only alternative, then we had conditions. There would be no MRP, which would have saved us a circa £2 million in 26-27. There had to be no strings attached like an external review, and the solution itself had to be renamed the SEND Capitalisation Directive. And finally, we demanded that any interest would be funded by government. Having negotiated hard, maybe perhaps too hard, the government decided, oh, no, we don't want you to do that. So with a week to go before our budget, they decided we can just borrow temporarily via our Treasury management powers, rather than formally doing it via a SEND Capitalisation Directive. This decision is based on their assurances that the central government have committed to returning the SEND system to financial sustainability in 2025. This approach just compounds the contravention of all normal accounting principles to date in order to aid a short-term crisis. We requested that they put this in writing, which they have. We've taken advice from both the external auditors and from CIPFA, both of which have confirmed in writing that this is our only and our best option. These are set out in the confidential addendum to the Cabinet's budget report. So, fellow councillors, now for something better news. On the other hand, we have a general fund which is balanced over 4 years, despite being landed with over £11.5 million of additional costs by the Labour government in the form of national insurance contributions and higher national living wage awards. A breach of a specific promise by the government minister and reassurances by those close to him. Council tax will have to go up by 4.99%, in line with nearly every other local authority in the country, but significantly less than at least 6 other authorities who will see 7.5% to 10% increases, and of course, just a fraction of the increase wanted by Conservative-run Hampshire, run by apparently an ex-Conservative councillor, who wanted 15% increase. We will be implementing £7.8 million worth of further savings set out in Appendix 5A, a significant proportion of which represent increases in fees and charges and efficiency savings, not service reductions. We will provide £6.5 million in extra resources to children's services and £14.4 million in wellbeing services in order to cover increased demand and inflationary pressures. There are key assumptions within this budget, which includes a 2.8% pay increase, a utilisation of the one-off business rate collection fund to deliver the regeneration activity and to externalise the Russell Coates Museum, amongst many other things. The risks we face as a council are significant and are well set out in the Section 25 report by the Section 151 officer. There are contingencies, there are provisions and reserves to deal with the risks that we face. But, councillors, we mess with these at our peril. This Three Towns Alliance budget continues to protect cultural and community development. We continue to invest in our highways and street cleaning. We are modernising our fleet to be more efficient and creating local action plans for clean energy. Fellow councillors, let's not forget where we came from. We inherited 2 years ago and the mess that was there when we started. And what have we achieved so far? Well, we inherited a best value notice and a SIP for resilience review because of non-traditional approaches to budgets, risky assumptions, and downright dodgy schemes. The Three Towns Alliance administration is the first and the only council in the country to have such a notice removed within 12 months. We inherited a children's services rated as inadequate, with underinvestment and inadequate priority for improvement. The BCP directors and staff need to be credited for with the active support of the Three Towns Alliance administration, that we have achieved what few other councils in the country have, a two-level improvement to good. We inherited a big plan designed to soothe egos and promote political ambitions, now replaced with a corporate strategy which puts people and places at the heart of our services. We inherited a failed regeneration company, now under investigation, which was a significant cost to the taxpayer, which has been replaced by a fully funded in-house team concentrating on getting the basics right. And we inherited an underinvested homeless strategy, which we had over 100 families staying in B&B accommodation, and where we now have, on latest advice, just one. This is a groundbreaking achievement, which must be the envy of every other council in the country. In 2024, we set a budget which rescued the finances of BCP Council from the Conservative budgets which were addicted to drawing £30 million a year from reserves. It was a tough budget, and we are still delivering on it. This 2025 budget is a steady-as-she-goes budget, and dare I say, a conservative, with a small c, budget. It deals with the fundamentals, and it rejects the gimmicks so loved by the previous administration. I therefore recommend councillors I would like to remind councillors, that it is their legal responsibility to set a budget tonight. So there's no ducking this issue. You have to set a budget tonight. I would also ask council to approve the decisions laid out in the council's report as unamended. Thank you.
Councillor Andy Martin, you're going to second the move and you have 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't think I'm going to need 6 minutes because I'm guilty of a schoolboy error, which was not checking with Councillor Cox what he was saying, because a lot of what I was going to say he's already said, so I'm going to cut it down a little bit. But first of all, can I say to Mr. Richards and his team, thank you for another remarkable job, especially when you look around local authorities up and down the country. There's another particular reason why I wanted to thank Mr. Richards, but I'll come to that in a few moments' time. I'd also like to thank Mike Cox, because from a political stewardship point of view, he has done a remarkable job too in the budget and the budget process. He's returned the council to stability, financial stability, to coherence, to sound financial management.
Excuse me, Mike, can you turn your mic off, please?
Just start again. All right. To responsible financial management, and crucially as well, to a process that is characterised by excellent councillor-officer relationships. And he mentioned the best value notice, and I don't need to repeat how that was such an important part of that best value notice being lifted. He's also mentioned the previous administration, so it is worth reminding ourselves that it was just 2 years ago that the previous leader of the council, but two, the gone, but most certainly not forgotten, Drew Mellor, basically bailed out right on the eve of the budget setting before he was able to drive the council off a cliff. And he even left our good friend, Councillor Broadhead, in the mire to pick up the pieces for a couple of months anyway, with his own special brand of FUCR finances. I have to say, when Councillor Broadhead was talking earlier on about risk and something that the administration is planning is going to be risky, I did have a wry smile when we look back, but we'll leave that. Councillor Cox also talked about local government finance system, and I did want to touch on that briefly, because it isn't just about governments or, Conservative, Labour, whatever, giving local authorities more responsibility, constantly giving them more responsibility, never taking responsibility away, and never financing those responsibilities properly. The local government, central government relationship with finance is a total mess. It defies logic, it's incoherent, and it's opaque. And those who've got some influence, we've got some, with the Labour government or with the Conservative councillors, actually ought to do more to try and tell the government this is not acceptable, to have last-minute things thrown at you, spanners in the works. We only ever find out what our settlement's going to be on the eve of budget setting or a few weeks beforehand. What other sector would operate in such a way, lurching from decision to decision to crisis in a way that local government is expected to do at the behest of central government, when you add all the other problems that they put on top of this? The final point I will make, given I'm cutting my speech down a bit, is to talk about one particular area of the budget that Councillor Cox mentioned. And he mentioned culture. Now, you wouldn't expect me not to mention the cultural budget. So I would like to thank Mr. Richins and my Cabinet colleagues for, yet again this year, protecting our cultural budget. That's our money we give to the national portfolio organisations, the money that we give to the Cultural Compact, investment in the Russell Coates Museum, investment in the Poole Museum, and all the cultural things that help us deliver on the Council's aims, ambitions and visions, whether that be in health and well-being, whether it be in education, whether it be in destination, or whether it be in reimagination or rejuvenation of our town centres. Culture, arts and culture plays an amazing part. I'd also like to mention, you may have read it in the press, that we have put a bid in for an extension year for the Arts by the Sea Festival, and we have retained our cultural development team, which is brilliant. And I did some calculations. I did check it with Mr. Richins before Cabinet, where our cultural budget is in fact between 0.2 and 0.3 of 1% of our revenue, of our £357 million revenue budget, which is a tiny amount of money, but it's worth its weight in gold and delivers so much for us. And can I just also say that last week I had the pleasure of speaking both with the Arts Council during a couple of meetings here and with the Heritage Lottery Fund, and they are extremely grateful for our commitment to politically and financially to the cultural sector, and of course they give us millions of pounds because of our commitment. So thank you for that. I think that's really important. And well, I've only got 17 seconds left, so I was actually talking longer than I imagined, but there we go. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Councillor Martin and Councillor Cox. We've received notice of an alternative budget amendment, and this has been circulated and published prior to this evening's meeting. So can I call upon Councillor Philip Broadhead and Councillor John Beasley as the proposer and seconder of the amendment to move their amendment, and between you, you have 10 minutes. So thank you very much, Councillor Broadhead.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. I would also like to start by thanking all of the staff and officers that have been involved in preparing the budget, including helping with the budget amendment. Colleagues, last year the Conservative group was much bolder and more ambitious in its alternative budget proposals. And this was because the administration budget wasn't traditional, as Councillor Cox and others had always promised. Whilst it had £27 million of savings, it balanced the books by using £25 million of reserves from the business rate surplus fund, including a nearly £6 million contingency to cover what they called optimism bias. Now, colleagues, we instead warned that these funds should be provisionally earmarked for priorities, or all that would happen would be, knowing that an easy pot of money was available, it would get swallowed up. Planning to spend funds on good initiatives, especially for young people, like our budget amendment said, would focus the mind and stop that money being squandered. Not only, colleagues, was that plan ignored, but all of our warnings came to pass. The Council has spent all of that contingency. Their so-called traditional budget, using £25 million of reserved, they spent the lot. So this year, colleagues, there is no magic money tree for the Council, and accordingly, our amendment is more limited in scope, but in my view, no less important. Now, no one can deny that our core town centres of Poole and Bournemouth are in serious trouble. Not a day goes by without residents bemoaning to me that the vibrant, safe and interesting high streets that they once loved are gone. Many tell me that they're now scared to go into their high streets, that they're not clean nor safe. But even worse, at precisely the time that we need to be re-encouraging residents to support, rediscover and boost our delicate town centre economies, many can't, because they can't even afford to visit them anymore. Car parking charges have reached, frankly, eye-watering levels. In many town centre car parks, it's now £7 to park for 2 hours and over a tenner for 3 hours. That is astronomical. And for a number of years now, the Conservative group have been warning that we've gone way past the limit. It's perhaps no surprise, therefore, that income has now started to fall in many of these sites. But instead of recognising this, the administration blames the weather. Well, our plan is to push away that storm and bring some sunshine to our town centres. A one-year trial to reduce car parking charges by 15% in Poole and Bournemouth town centre car parks off-season. Now, I'm convinced that not only would it work, but if custom and footfall increased, it wouldn't cost anything like what the estimates suggest. But there's only one way to find out. Now, to balance the potential cost of our town centre improvement project, as I've outlined in my explanatory email to all councillors, I asked the Council for a breakdown of the revenue budget allocations for a number of key areas. In the reply to this, one thing stuck out. Every area that the Council is spending on projects, such as 20 mile per hour, bus, cycle lanes and other projects, has £0 allocated next to them from the revenue account. And that's because they're in the capital programme, and the capital programme pays for these projects and their staff, as it should be. Every area that is, except one glaring outlier, the climate team. Not only is the cost of the climate team £300,000 out of the revenue account, but their project fund of £1.4 million is also inexplicably revenue too, unlike anywhere else in the Council's finances. Now, this is not how we normally do things. If we have projects such as the commendable plan to put solar on council buildings, which will, I'm sure, save money, they should be part of the capital programme funded by Investor Save, business cases or grants, including the team costs. Like everything else, rather than competing with council services. This is an easy win for the council. Now, unfortunately, I'm limited in my budget amendment and not allowed to present a wider plan for this area. The budget process dictates a one-in, one-out approach, forcing us to suggest scrapping the entire climate funding, and that's not what this is about. Incidentally, this is compounded by the fact that we were only given 48 hours notice this year of the alternate budget process, as opposed to the usual 7 days, which makes the whole task frustratingly difficult. But to be clear, our wider plan would be not to stop the climate team in its entirety or to stop the 2 projects outlined, but instead to bring business cases to bring that work into the capital programme. Now, I've been very, very clear on this with colleagues, including in the email that I sent last week. So if anyone stands up tonight saying that we want to scrap the climate change team forever and cancel their projects, that is not true. I've outlined how we would rebase the cost for that team and their projects like every other council department. And as I've said, it's strange that the council hasn't done this previously. So, colleagues, this amendment is not a choice between saving our town centres and protecting the environment. You can and should do both. So, I'd suggest let's try and put party politics to one side for the night. You can give it a go. You can give it a go. Because I think we should reduce car parking charges, boost our high streets, and give residents the reason to love our towns again. Thank you.
Councillor Beasley, do you want to come in now?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I have pleasure in seconding the amendment, and I reserve my right to speak.
Councillor Tarling.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you, Councillor Broadhead, for bringing an amendment. I think it's fantastic, except for one glaring omission on the very first page. As the one of the ward councillors for Christchurch Town Centre, I think you've missed something out on the BCP. Only thing I can think is that Christchurch Town Centre doesn't need improvement, and I would like to thank Councillor Broadhead if that's what he's implying by this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tarling. Who else was indicating? Councillor who? Oh, I'm so sorry. Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate the opportunity to speak on this. I had a resident email me just this week saying, why can't we reduce car parking in Bournemouth Town Centre? Why can't we have parking free periods? How about after 6 p.m? A lot of towns do that to encourage people back into the town, to go to the pavilion, go to the theatre, use hospitality and support our businesses. But no, what we do, we just basically put the charges back up. And I think that actually it's one of the big nails in the coffin of our town centres. So I will quote my resident because she's put it so well. The council just see parking as a taxation, instead of using it as a means to encourage people into the town. Other towns offer free parking and they have a much better offer to their residents. We should be supporting hospitality, business, and we should be getting our town back up to where it should be and getting our residents back. Off-peak, why can't we have free parking in the winter months? And I'm afraid I agree with her very strongly. And I think she's put it really well. Why are we doing this? Does anybody go to Bournemouth and see how much it has changed over the years? And one of the things we could do would be to support this through parking. When I first became a councillor and I sat down with the leader of the bid in Bournemouth Town Centre, he said to me, Hazel, the one thing you could do to improve Bournemouth is to reduce the parking charges. I've been in as councillor of Bournemouth Town Centre for a while now, and unfortunately I've not achieved that, and I think it's a great shame. There's lots of other things that we could do to improve the town centre, but I'm really encourage my colleagues to support this amendment because I think that it's what our town deserves, what Paul deserves. I agree about Christchurch as well, but obviously you don't have many car parks these days, do you? So there we go. Thank you very much.
Councillor Joe Salmon.
God, it's a bit of a shame we've not started off with something serious. I mean, if the pitch begins, last year I said, let's just blow this contingency money you've set aside on some stuff I've written down on the back of an envelope, and then you go, oh wait, wasn't that a brilliant idea? It's such a brilliant idea that, oh yeah, you did need that contingency fund, but somehow that proves my point. Here's my next brilliant bonza idea. Just imagine if parking in the town centre was what it was maybe 2 years ago. Wouldn't it be banging in the town centre. I tell you what, people don't go to the town centre because of crime, antisocial behaviour, because the shops are shutting and all of that. For God's sake, this isn't a thing. This is not a serious suggestion, you know. This is just an amendment that's been put forward for some words in the echo, you know. I'm sure there was a brilliant article. We've done it. Do we really have to discuss it anymore? This is just what? Bit of climate denial by stealth, you know. Pointless, absolutely pointless political point scoring. If we're really going to be serious about what's the problem in our town centres, we're not talking about parking charges. Our town centres had slightly cheaper parking a couple of years ago. The shops were still shutting. I've got friends who say if they don't go to Bournemouth and they don't go, oh yeah, parking's a bit much, they go, oh, there aren't shops there. When somebody goes to Southampton instead of going to Bournemouth, they're not doing it to save money on parking. They're doing it because there are more facilities there, better value and all of that. The reason we've got problems with crime, antisocial behaviour and all of that is because ultimately our political system doesn't let politicians roll up their sleeves, deal with these problems, and instead encourages this kind of behaviour. Nobody here with any common sense supports this amendment, and I think if you look at the nitty-gritty, even the idea of scrapping this team, that's probably not even going to save us any money once we've looked at redundancies and redeployment and challenges. Absolute pie in the sky. It's got its headline in the Echo, probably, hopefully, you know. Why are we even bothering to discuss something so ridiculous? We deserve better.
Thank you, Councillor Salmon. I've got Councillor Connolly next. Thank you.
Thank you, yes. I have to say I agree with an awful lot of that. In short, I think it's absolutely staggering, 2025, that the Conservatives still think the work on the climate project is a nice to have. We as a council rightly made a commitment to net zero, and so we're not supportive of anything that puts that in danger. And I know you say that you would seek to fund this instead through the capital programme rather than the revenue budget, but it's not fleshed out how or what, and if it were that easy, we are all ears. Now, I like the sound of a town centre improvement project. We're really interested to read about it and see what the plan is, but all it is foregoing car park income for a year at a cost of 600 grand. If you think the solution to our blighted town centres can be fixed by doing that alone, then you are clearly underestimating the problem, and it's very clear why you haven't been able to get a handle on the decline of our town centres over the last decade, since I was a child. I've asked people around, what would you do if car parking charges were lower in the town centre? What would you do? Would that make a difference? And everyone just says to me, to do what? People's spending habits, their leisure habits aren't going to change in a year. It's not enough to make a business case for opening a premises. So this sort of thing might have helped a decade ago, but the problem is much, much wider now, and this in isolation will just not make the difference needed. So we as a Labour group are willing to work with other parties to come up with a proper town centre improvement plan if there is genuine interest in doing that, but there needs to be a wider package of measures for it to actually have an effect. Without it, we'd just be losing thousands in revenue and endangering our climate projects to no purpose. So we won't be supporting it.
Councillor Herritt now, please.
Thank you, Chair. On the face of it, a trial of a reduction of car parking fees would sound like a good idea. However, once you actually look at the detail of this proposal, it's a bit of a nonsense, really, and would fail to deliver anything meaningful. I think, firstly, some context, and you all know I love a bit of that. Since 2015, Bournemouth Town Centre car parking prices have risen from £1.10 for 2 hours to £3.10, and pool prices from £1.50 to £2.40 in the same period. Conservative administrations have overseen price increases of over 150% in Bournemouth, and it's only when it's the last few percent now they're suddenly interested. And rises of just 5% last year and 4% this. Even when they were burning through the reserves, car parking was so important they were lifting the prices by 20%. And if car parking is the biggest problem, it's one that they created and only recently seem to think is an issue. Some current context too. Bus journeys increased by 2.8 million across the conurbation to March 24, and I'm assured remain strong, and footfall in our town centres is up by more than 10% in each of the 3 towns, including Christchurch. Since June, not everyone is arriving by car. With the worst summer for beach resort weather since 2018, where most of the money from car parking is taken, affecting this year's income, along with many other factors that can affect our car parking income, suggests that actually a drop in the car parking prices are not the panacea presented. The sacrificial lamb at the altar of car parking, the climate team. I will leave colleagues to explain why this is awful, but safe to say that if unvirtuous signalling were a thing, we found it. I think it's also obviously important to highlight why this move would be woefully ineffective. I've heard plenty about thinking strategically, and this is the opposite of that, a finger in the air and a hope for the best. Dorset Council very kindly provided a real-life case study on the impact of a scheme like this. When they halved parking costs last summer, the result, 180k lost and a 1.8% reduction in car park transactions across those towns. Not a raging success. The proposal for 15% off through the non-summer part of the year would create, based on the average length visit of 2 hours, around a 35p or so benefit per car. The grand plan to reinvigorate town centres will afford the driver or their passenger a Friday. That's why I'd urge anyone to vote down this amendment. It's purely ineffective nonsense designed to grab headlines rather than actually achieve anything. Meanwhile, we'll continue working with our residents, town centre businesses and other stakeholders to build on the progress we made through 2024.
Thank you, Councillor. Now we have Councillor Andy Martin, please.
Thank you, Chair. I don't want to talk about car parking charges. I will talk about something else. But I do have a piece of advice for Councillor Broadhead, as upstartish as that may be. Talk to the people that I've talked to about Bournemouth Town Centre. You're being very doom-mongery over there about why people don't want to come and it's all rubbish. Let me just give you a few facts about what is happening in the town centre. What is happening is that confidence and optimism is returning to Bournemouth Town Centre. And do you know why that's happening? Well, let's look at some of the things that are on the go. The Ivy has opened. Has anybody seen how many people are going to the Ivy? How many thousands of people have been to the Ivy? I'm not allowed to tell you what the figures are, but it's thousands of people coming into the town centre. So people are coming into the town centre. What else is going on? You've got Patch, the workspace in Bobby's. You've got the Botanist coming. You've got the redevelopment of the House of Fraser with accommodation at the top and shopfront units at the bottom. You've got Beals having had planning permission. You've got a tenant coming into W.H. Smith, which I don't think is in the public domain, so I'm not going to talk about that. But, well, I'm going to talk about it, but I'm not going to tell you who it is. That's all I'm saying. You have JD Gyms have just opened in the Richmond Gardens Centre. What are you mumbling about now? I can't hear you. You've done all this, have you? Oh, okay, right. I didn't know that. JD Gyms have opened up with, I think there's some free parking going on with that as well. And you've got Barbara's Beer House up in Old Christchurch Road. All these organisations are investing in Bournemouth because they're confident and optimistic. And I have spoken to all of these people in the last 2 or 3 months for a specific project which will become apparent in the next couple of weeks or so. And I've also spoken to Goadsby. And Goadsby, their retail and development director, has said that there is more interest in Bournemouth than there has been, in Bournemouth Town Centre, than there has been for a very long time. So all I would say is, for goodness sake, stop talking Bournemouth Town Centre down like you have been doing. Talk it up. The narrative needs to change, and it is changing. So let's have no more of this nonsense. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Martin, for the good news report. Councillor Hadley, would you like to speak next, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I could say the same for Paul. The Conservative budget amendment is a fascinating insight into their priorities. Across the pond, Donald Trump and his malevolent backers are busy dismantling the systems that support climate responsibility. And here is the leader of BCP opposition attempting to get in on the act. Stunning. We all saw the images of large tracts of Los Angeles on fire, whipped by unprecedented winds powered by climate change. Closer to home, the wetter weather in recent years is also directly linked to rising global temperatures. For every degree centigrade rise, there's 7% more water vapour in the atmosphere. And in our maritime environment, that turns to rain, saturates the ground, increases flooding, and yes, hits our visitor volumes. I was reading only this morning of the first mosquito-borne virus to survive with rising UK temperatures, which is threatening to wipe out blackbirds in southeast England. This has implications for human disease vectors. Now is not the time to disinvest in climate mitigation. There are two parts to the Conservative cuts. The small team that tracks our progress also seeks out grants, maintains relationships with other organisations who are also attempting to make a difference, and they challenge services across the Council to reduce their carbon footprint. Remove the team and conveniently will not be able to write the business cases to achieve even the reduced agenda that he claims to support. Perhaps the Conservative leader hopes we've forgotten the basis of the Futures Fund and the Green Futures Fund under the Miller-Broadhead administration. No business case is required, not even basic logic, and their record of extremely poor investments. A few wide area network connections at a time when City Fibre were flooding our area with cheap fibre, investing without due diligence in the inland home site on Carter's Quay, as a planning consent and the development company were both expiring, and electric barbecues with no checks on the available power to hook them up or revenue provision to keep them clean. A climate reserve was allocated to enable us to urgently progress projects to reduce our carbon footprint. They do require simple business justifications. Projects so far include the local energy plan. Our conurbation is significantly under-resilient for electricity supply. Perhaps we would prefer to just accept having power cuts. Progressing the opportunities for heat networks, communal heating solutions, including working with hospitals and key worker housing. Work at the leisure centres, particularly Two Rivers Meet, supporting a big grant from Sport England for heat pumps and solar panels. Energy use is already halved through that early work. And others. The work is essential to building the business case for future capital schemes. The Conservative amendment would make no sense. It's back to borrowing from the future. Unless we have a clear plan for meeting our climate obligations, we will in future face a multi-million-pound annual carbon offsetting cost. We are acting responsibly in facing these challenges. The Conservatives are not. Paragraph 10 of their own amendment even highlights how backward this proposal is. I will be voting against this frivolous amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Hadley. Councillor David Martin, you indicated.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just going to say that my points have been covered, so I don't wish to repeat those that have been raised. Thank you.
Councillor Wright, I think you're next.
Yeah, I don't think this is supposed to be a silver bullet to cure everything that's going on in our town centres. Less people means less businesses means less people, and so the cycle continues. We may not get our thriving town centres back, they may become more service orientated. But one thing we can do to try and make this downward spiral less is to try and get more people into our town centres. Reducing car parking fees would go in some small way to improve footfall, which in turn would hopefully encourage more businesses. We've tried the buses and they get worse year on year. Park and ride isn't working. The experiment with cycle lanes has failed. Millions has been spent on cycle lanes that for all intents and purposes are completely empty. This Dutch-style cycling utopia we've been promised has not materialised. The car is what we've got, it's what residents want, and it's what we've got for the foreseeable future until a viable replacement is found. So let's make it cheaper for car drivers to come into our town centres, spend their money in the shops that we all say we support. I'll support this amendment. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Trent, I think you're next.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I do think that Bournemouth does need some TLC, and I'm pleased to hear that it's got a few things moving its direction. I used to regularly go to Bournemouth to purchase things and so on, but that was 25, 30 years ago. Quite frankly, the only time I ever come to Bournemouth now is here. Other than that, and the point I really wanted to make is lumping Poole and Bournemouth as one. I think Poole is actually a very successful town centre considering, because there was foresight in the past to put an indoor shopping centre in the town centre. There's a bus station that leads you right outside the indoor shopping centre. There's a railway station within easy walk. And there's at least a few alternative independent shops outside the main Dolphin shopping centre. And that is quite frankly what Bournemouth needs more of. And the car parking charges is a bit of a red herring, because I've had online arguments with people and so on, and they name certain places which are so much better. One of them they name is Bath. I had to go to Bath for a meeting a few months ago. It cost me £6 for the first 2 hours to park. And when I found another parking space, I paid £5 for the other 3 hours. So it wasn't exactly a cheap place to go. So that argument doesn't stack up there. And I was doing retail stock taking a few years ago, about 8 or 9 years ago, and one of the nightmare places to get a job was Southampton. It was £12 to park for any length of time, it seems. So actually, car parking charges, although they may affect some people in some of the times, it certainly isn't the make or break situation when it comes to parking. I think it's what a town centre offers and the ambience of the town centre. The only thing I would like to say, I last went to Poole Town Centre yesterday. It was unfortunately someone had collapsed in the street, and the dysfunctional behaviour by someone who was obviously the worse for wear for lager drinking, etc., that is the problem, and that is something that we really need to focus on. But as far as car parking charges are concerned, it's not excessively high in this area, but we just need to make sure that the offer is there, that's a better quality offer than we've had for a few years.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm going to call the next three speakers and then we'll go back to Councillor Beasley. So my next speaker on this list is Councillor Dove.
Thank you, and I agree, Bournemouth Town Centre and Poole Town Centre could do with some TLC, and it's a shame that Councillor Martin, has decided that actually it's just running the towns down when it's not. This is how people feel, and it's affecting businesses and it's affecting trading. So we have to do something. We just can't keep preaching to people in the hope that they will believe things have changed. We started off with the first speaker just shouting basically and deciding that actually why don't we instead do some positive actions that will help improve the safety and the ambience and the cleanliness of the towns. Well, we tried that last year. We asked that we could triple the Town Centre Improvement Fund to £1 million. That would be deep cleaning the town centres, investment in further safety measures, planting and greening of town centres, helping implement schemes as the high street rental auction powers, and then also increasing the CSAS provision in Bournemouth so that it would match Poole. That was voted down. He has a very short memory, as do other people in this chamber when they talk about they want to see the improvements. They had their chance. We just cannot keep sitting here year after year after year, ignoring proposals because it happens to come from the wrong political party. We either make a difference or we all go home. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dove. Councillor Pudovin.
Thank you, Chair. Frankly, in my view, this proposal is absolute arrant nonsense. Somebody has already said that no doubt the reason for it was to grab an Echo headline, which happened, but I was very interested to read the comments on the story, on the proposal in the Echo, and one recurring theme was that 15% was nowhere enough. It wouldn't make any difference. And when you think about it, 15% for most parking charges for town centre is probably less than £1. Now, what difference is that going to make to people? You couldn't even get a cup of coffee for that. Another problem is that it's only for a year. What happens at the end of the year when the prices have to go up to what they should have been and would have got to gradually had they made a small increase now and then very likely another increase next year? Imagine the howls of anguish when the charges have to go up to cover 2 years' worth of increases. But the main concern for my mind, I'm not dealing with the climate issue. Councillor Hadley and others have dealt with that very, very comprehensively. I'm looking at the Section 25 report of the Chief Financial Officer in this report, which is on page 5. Councillor Broadhead was talking about the TTA having raided the reserves very disparagingly. But when you look at what the Chief Financial Officer says, the proposal involves the use of earmarked reserves, and therefore it is important that it is recognised as a one-off proposal that is not financially sustainable. End of story. Damning with no praise at all. I will not be supporting it.
Thank you, Councillor. Now, I believe I just have the leader, and then it's back to Councillor Beasley. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. When residents put their faith in this administration to lead this council, we made 3 clear promises: to get the basics right, to prioritise and protect the services that matter most to the most vulnerable in our communities, and to live within our means. And in just 18 months, we've made huge leaps in honouring these principles. From finding savings, changing how we operate and restoring good governance, we have ensured that value for money for residents while securing the council's health and sustainability. And there's lots of things I could talk about that I'm proud about, these last 18 months represent a shift in how BCP Council operates. We moved away from vanity projects and questionable deals in favour of sound governance and traditional financial management, and above all, we've prioritised openness and transparency. And I have to say I was pleased to see the Conservative amendment. It serves as confirmation of the strength of our administration's principles in budget-making decisions, and if anything, it's a tweak that demonstrates a political priority badly, deleting the climate action team and climate projects for a 1-year, very small reduction in car parking costs that won't make the difference. As an administration, we've worked hard improving our town centres. Poole is thriving, and Christchurch is always a great pleasure to visit. We've built strong relationships with partners in the bids and across local businesses. And in the last budget, we made a significant capital investment of £350,000, which leveraged in an additional £100,000 of funding for projects through the Town Centre Improvement Fund. And pretending that contingency wasn't needed is an absolute red herring and would have bankrupted our council. In Bournemouth, we've spent the last 18 months addressing the fundamental issues that past Conservative administrations have neglected for decades. And as a result, we are now seeing new businesses choosing Bournemouth as a place to invest. This amendment is not a choice of scrapping climate or saving the town centre, as Councillor Broadhead has said, because it won't do either. Doubling down on the anti-active travel narrative didn't work for the Conservatives in 2023 when they hemorrhaged seats in the local elections, and it didn't work in 2024 when they were wiped out in all of our local areas except Christchurch, and it won't work next time either. Every town centre is in need of so much more care and attention than a notional slither of off-car parking charges, and I'm proud that this administration is doing that work. We have 2 options today to fulfil our duty to set a balanced budget, and I'd urge councillors to reject this amendment and get on and vote for the 3 Towns Alliance budget unamended. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. I'm going to now call on Councillor Beasley, who has, I think, how many minutes?
4 minutes and 17.
4 minutes and 17 seconds, John.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Chairman. So I'm pleased to second the amendment to the budget for the coming year. There can be no doubt that the town centres of Bournemouth and Poole are in terminal decline, and unless something starts to move the dial very soon, there will be little of value to save as far as most residents and businesses are concerned. It didn't have to be this way. Since 2019, when BCP Council was formed, it inherited a local economy which was confident and vibrant, and which is still attracting investment across the two town centres. Both of them have since declined rapidly over the past 5 years. Quite simply, although the outlook across the country is far from encouraging, there are better prospects for most investors and shoppers elsewhere. And so, both Bournemouth and Poole town centres continue to decline. There seems to be little interest by the council in even trying to do something about the situation. However, there is a real opportunity to change the direction and thinking of investors and business owners if the council look to take a positive lead. This relatively small measure of reducing car parking charges outside of the peak summer season would set our town centres in Bournemouth and Poole apart. They could act as a catalyst to bring back some confidence. It would show that all is not lost. Handled with positivity and working with all those who can help us turn the situation around could really make the difference. That is what we did in Bournemouth in response to the last recession, and we attracted substantial investment and growing confidence over time. If the local council does not show confidence, then why should we expect most businesses and residents to be any different? I know that the instinct of most councillors will be to reject this amendment, and the administration will readily find reasons or even excuses for not doing anything which will upset their plans, none of which will achieve anything other than further decline, not even managed decline. But I ask you to think about how very little is actually being done to make our town centres attractive and become places to visit. Places where local residents and out-of-season visitors actually spend money and start to bring back some vitality to Bournemouth and Poole town centres. Every year at budget time, you will see recommendations which add just a bit more to the charges. Surely people will pay what the council demands, is the thinking. It's hardly imaginative, but this amendment to the budget gives us the opportunity to test the rules of supply and demand by reducing the charges, publicising them, and let demand increase. More revenue for the council, more footfall for the shops and restaurants, and more spend in the local economy. More confidence in the town centres, and a wake-up call to investors that the council has pump-primed the area as a place where the council is taking a lead in attracting business and consumers. The alternative is even more drift and further decline, leading to an even greater loss of confidence and a worsening reputation for both Bournemouth and Poole town centres. It doesn't have to be like this. If we as a council have the ambition to begin the process of change, if the council got stuck in and started regeneration of Bournemouth and Poole town centres with competitive car parking charges, even if only for the coming year, and followed through with a meaningful strategy to encourage a collective opportunity to bring back some positivity and encouragement to businesses, the public would start to notice that the council was proud to be behind a return of their footfall and spending. It would be all too easy to divide along party lines and reject this proposal out of hand. We can make a real difference if there is a real will, and it can be achieved within a balanced budget for the next year. Madam Chair, I urge members to support the amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Beasley. Now, I'm going to call on the proposer of the amendment, which is Councillor Broadhead, to sum up, and you've got 3 minutes, Councillor Broadhead. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman, and thank you, colleagues, for the debate. It wasn't quite the spirited debate I was hoping for, but, you know, you don't win them all. I'll just go over a few of the points that have been raised in the chamber this evening and hopefully try and respond. First of all, with Councillor Salmon from the Greens suggesting that this wasn't a serious suggestion, just designed to grab headlines. It's just me. I wouldn't do this. But no, in all seriousness, the fact that this is not a serious suggestion, have you asked your residents? Have you spoken to them and asked them whether this type of thing is something that is on their minds? Because I have, and we hear about it all the time. And as you've heard from Councillor Dubb, you then went on to talk about there's much better ways of improving the town centres. Well, guess what? We tried that last year and you voted against that as well. So you probably need to just pick a team. The Labour Party then went on to say that this just simply won't make a difference. Are you actually saying that there is no correlation between the eye-watering charges that we now are seeing and the town centre struggling? I think it's absolutely inevitable that when you get to the stage where it's £10 plus for 3 hours, that people will stop using the town centres. The Lib Dems, through Councillor Harriott, parroted that view, implying that you should just use a bus instead. But, you know, Councillor Harriott, you know that that is not enough. We do need to be supporting them in as many ways as possible. Not everybody can just purely rely on sustainable travel. Instead, he wanted to focus on all of their progress instead, and I look forward to finding out what that progress is. Councillor Martin accused me of being a doom-mongerer. Well, I've never been accused of being a doom-mongerer before, Councillor Martin, but thank you, incidentally, for listing all the ways that Bournemouth in particular is seeing some improvement. I'll be the first champion for the improvements that are there, not least because nearly everything that you'd suggested were things that we've been working on really closely for the last number of years. Everything from the Ivy through to the new gyms. In fact, the Ivy, incidentally, the former leader, Councillor Slade, on social media said that that was a Phil Broadhead pipe dream that was never going to happen, a tweet which I've saved, but, you know, you're welcome. Andy Hadley, I completely understand the views on climate and the climate emergency. I voted for the climate emergency, but you didn't listen clearly to anything I said at the beginning. Instead, and I've been blamed for a lot, I'm now apparently causing the LA fires as well. So this is just utter hyperbole. And then finally, coming to the leader, you mentioned 3 priorities for your administration. I forgot the first one, but the other 2 were to live within your means and protect services. You talked about the traditional financial arrangements that you now have, and yet last year you balanced your budget using reserves, and this year you're getting a £60 million bailout from government. Look, we've covered a lot of ground on this. I do think there is a way to help protect our town centres. This isn't the panacea solution, but listen to your residents. A 1-year trial, this will make a difference, and we can do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Broadhead. Now, I'm going to call on the proposer of the original budget, Mike Cox, to respond for 3 minutes. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I really wanted to welcome this last-minute Conservative amendment to the budget, not least for highlighting the fundamental soundness of our own proposals, which we've set out. I just wanted to correct him on a few things, though. 48 hours notice, I think you were claiming, absolute rubbish. If you actually bothered to attend here and read the Constitution, you would see that you had plenty of notice. It's written down. If you spent more time here, less time wandering up and down the country, commiserating with councillors who've just lost their seats, then maybe you'd actually figure out how this place works. In terms of the capital programme, every single capital programme will be assessed, and if we can capitalise it, we will capitalise it, and that's what will happen. So please don't say that we're ignoring this particular type of expenditure by not doing that. So let's just examine the proposals. You've missed out, as my fellow councillor said, you've missed out Christchurch. Why have you missed out Christchurch? What's the matter with Christchurch? Do you not bother with Christchurch? Of course, you haven't got any councillors in Christchurch, but that's probably it. Mind you, I have to say, Christchurch actually are going to have free parking thanks to the Free Towns Alliance. A 15% reduction in a selected period. This just smacks of opportunism, opposition opportunism and blatant hypocrisy, when you yourself increased it by 20% in the 2 years prior. You claim to help that it will help footfall and retailers. Well, we all want that. But this has already been tested last year in Dorset. It failed. Please, you've got to learn from your mistakes. And this was actually a Liberal Democrat mistake, so don't worry about it. The resident card, we're going to introduce a resident card, and that will provide more benefits to residents for parking, and that's residents and not non-residents, which yours would help. How will this be paid for? Well, you're going to dismantle the Climate Action Team, who are delivering important work to help BCP towards net zero, a thing that you voted for, and yet you want to waste £180,000 on redundancy costs to get rid of them. In addition, you want to remove badly needed funds which will be allocated to spend on making BCP a greener and a more healthy place to live. But how are you going to deliver all this without a team which you are just about to be made redundant? This amendment gives me a vision, or shall I say it gives me a nightmare, of a Conservative future administration asking for capitalisation directives because they tried to capitalise clean air and then sell it back to residents. Maybe in cahoots with Del Boy, trying to sell Peckham spring water. I'm sorry, but this amendment is a farce. It's financially illiterate, and it's just a political stunt designed to appeal to certain voting demographics who the Conservatives are desperate to cling on to. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. Now we're going to proceed to the vote, and we have a recorded vote for this, and we're voting on the budget amendment. So I'm going to pass over now to the Chief Executive, who will call your names.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to be clear for members, this is voting on the amendment to the budget, so if you're in favour of the amendment, please vote for. So, firstly, Councillor Cameron Adams. For. Councillor Sue Aikenhead.
Against.
Councillor Hazel Allen.
For.
Councillor Marcus Andrews.
Against.
Councillor Sarah Armstrong. Councillor Stephen Bartlett.
Abstain.
Councillor John Beasley.
For.
Councillor Philip Broadhead.
For.
Councillor David Brown.
Against.
Councillor Olivia Brown.
Against.
Councillor Simon Bull.
Against.
Councillor Richard Burton.
Against.
Councillor Patrick Canavan.
Against.
Councillor Sharon Carr-Brown.
Against.
Councillor Adrian Chapman-Law.
Against.
Councillor Brian Chick.
Against.
Councillor Eleanor Connolly.
Against.
Councillor Peter Cooper.
Against.
Councillor Mike Cox.
Against.
Councillor Leslie Dedman.
Against.
Councillor David Dawden-Gibson.
For.
Councillor Bobby Dove.
For.
Councillor Michelle Dower.
Against.
Councillor Millie Earle.
Against.
Councillor Jackie Edwards. Councillor Dwayne Farr.
For.
Councillor David Flagg. Councillor Matthew Gillett.
For. Okay, sorry. Against.
Okay, go. Councillor Crispin Goodall.
Against.
Councillor Andy Hadley.
Against.
Councillor Jeff Hanna. Councillor Emily Harmon.
Against.
Councillor Richard Herritt. Thank you. Councillor Brian Hitchcock.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Mark. Oh, sorry, Councillor Howell's not here. Councillor Alistair Keddy.
Against.
Councillor Marion Lepedovan.
Against.
Councillor Sandra Macro.
Against.
Councillor Andy Martin. Councillor David Martin. Councillor Gillian Martin.
Against.
Councillor Jamie Martin. Councillor Chris Matthews.
Against.
Councillor Simon McCormack. Councillor Pete Miles. Councillor Sandra Moore.
Against.
Councillor Anne-Marie Moriarty.
Against.
Councillor Bernadette Nanovo.
Against.
Councillor Lisa Northover.
Against.
Councillor Rachel Patterson-West.
Against.
Councillor Margaret Phipps. Councillor Karen Rampton. Councillor Felicity Rice.
Against.
Councillor Vanessa Ricketts. Councillor Chris Rigby.
Against.
Councillor Joe Salmon.
Against.
Councillor Kate Salmon.
Against.
Councillor Peter Sidaway.
Against.
Councillor Paul Slade.
Against.
Councillor Toby Slade. Councillor Vicky Slade.
Against.
Councillor Michael Tarling.
Against.
Councillor Tony Trent.
Against.
Councillor Oliver Waters.
Against.
Councillor Claire Waite.
Against.
Councillor Kieran Wilson.
Against.
And Councillor Gavin Wright. Thank you very much, councillors.
Thank you, members. So that was voted down 55 to 10 with one abstention. Thank you. Members, I'm going to suggest that in order to get a good run in for the next debate, we have our comfort break now. If that, oh, everybody's getting up anyway. It's only going to be only going to be the 10 minutes, please, because then we can get back to the chamber and carry on. Thank you. Thank you, members. We're going into the debate on the substantive motion, which is the budget. I'm going to ask the non-administration political group leaders or their nominated spokespersons if they wish to speak on the budget proposal, and they have 5 minutes. So, is that you, Councillor Broadhead, again? Surely. No. Sorry, I'm so sorry, Councillor Broadhead, for one moment there. Yeah, Councillor Canavan, would you wish to speak on the budget? Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Chair. That was a bit unexpected. Well, can I start, a bit unusually for me, by thanking people and thanking everybody who has been involved in the preparation of the budget. I don't agree with it. I will be opposing it. That's just a heads up. But I want to thank everybody for their part in getting it to this point, because it would be churlish not to recognise the amount of work that's involved. I also wanted to just echo something that Councillor Cox said about the greater transparency this year around the budget scrutiny. Having been involved a little bit in that, learned quite a lot really. Learned that actually in the London Borough of Brent, they start their budget scrutiny process in November. And I did rather cheekily suggest to the Chief Executive and the Chief Finance Officer that they might want to do that. They didn't quite agree, but that's something I will save for another day. So, last year, I opposed the budget really because, not only because of the level of cuts last year, 27 million, but also because I felt that it set us on a path of cuts, and it set us down a road that I didn't really feel comfortable that we were going down, because it didn't really seem to have any end in sight, but other than years and years of cuts. And that seems to me the case this year also. It's interesting, I think, that what we have is a situation where I feel there is just a lack of ideas, just a lack of ambition, just a lack of knowing what it is that we're trying to achieve within BCP. And it's been said that this budget is about getting the basics right. Do you know, I just can't recognise that. And the reason I say that is because at least once a week now, I get an email from a particular resident in a particular road in my ward. All this resident wants is to live in a street that is not permanently filthy. She can't get her bins emptied properly. She can't get fly tipping dealt with properly. She can't get the litter cleaned or the roads cleaned. So that, for me, is the basics. That is what our residents want us as a council to deliver. And I just don't see anything in this budget that actually helps. So we've been told recently that the transformation is complete. Job done, apparently. But if that is the case, what's next? Where is the vision about where we go forward from here? How do we build the economy? How do we grow our local economy? And, the steady as you go is okay, but there has to be something after that. You have to have somewhere to go beyond that, because without it, I just don't see any way forward, really. Now, we talked a bit already about the Bournemouth Town Centre, and I just wanted to thank Councillor Martin for his comments about what I'm going to paraphrase him, but what he's kind of indicated are a few green shoots in relation to the possible developments in the Bournemouth Town Centre. But you have to have more than a vision. You have to have more than words. You do have to have a sense of urgency about what it is you want to do, and that's really what I think is missing. I'm not decrying it because I think he's right. I think Councillor Martin is right in terms of that possibility. But I think we do need, to find several more gears in terms of developing the town centre. So my other point really is really about the paragraph 67 and 68 of the budget report, and this is about the missing 2.34% shortfall in the budget based on a decision that was made by a previous administration. I have asked about whether we could find a way of retrieving that money this year. I think, in a way, Councillor Cox has said we kind of already have in a way. But I really do not want to lose sight of that. I really think it is something that we need to address. We may have to address it in the next financial year, but I do not want to lose it. And I just think we need to factor that in. So, Chair, that is my contribution for what it's worth. I just believe that Bournemouth has a lot to offer, and we do need to be positive about it, and we do need to be constructive about it. And BCP as a whole has much to offer, but we do have to start shouting, and we do have to start waving, because we're not drowning. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Canavan. Councillor Chris Rigby from the Green Group, would you wish to have your 5 minutes, please?
I would. Thank you very much, Chair. I'll get straight to the point as well, as quickly as the Labour leader did there, and say I'm also not going to be supporting this budget. And the primary reason for that is because there's not actually a lot to support in it. And I'm not putting the blame on the administration who put this budget together. I think you've done a good job. And I'm not even putting the blame on the previous administration, who their amendment was nicking a bit from climate funding, reduced parking charges. It shows how little there actually is to play within this budget and what we can do. I've sat here now for years and years debating the budget, and all I'm really getting is lowlights, not really highlights. 2022, there was 5.5 million savings, 23, 33 million savings, 24, 41, this year 27.8 million. It's over 80 million over the last 4 years, which have been stripped away from the residents of BCP, who are paying their council tax. And that's gone up, and so have the responsibilities which we've had from the government, and their funding which we're getting from government after government is decreasing. And this was really brought to bear on me when I looked at the results of the consultation on the budget. And commendation for that, by the way. That I think the consultation was really well done, and I think this is the sort of stuff that we should be doing. And we spoke about how consultation could be better, and I think this is really a step in the right direction. But what struck me by reading it is how little we, and I mean we, not just us here, we, everyone in BCP, how little we've come to actually expect from public spending. When I looked at the lists of the importance of council spending that people were looking at on the services, it was as expected at the top, providing children's social care, adult social care. Who's not going to say that's important? Supporting schools, education, community safety, antisocial behaviour. These are all the basics. These are the basic things we should be doing. It's really simple. And then we moved down the list, and that's where it really broke my heart. Things like keeping streets clean, providing job prospects, community services, providing sports and leisure facilities, providing libraries, supporting cultural activities and venues. These were the bottoms of the list. And this is what we should be doing. This is what we need to be doing for people. And we're not able to, because we're having funding taken away from us and having to create budgets to do the very, very basics. And the thing is, all of this stuff is so vital to a good, cohesive society. And the fact that they're not seen as important is just demonstrating how low expectations have fallen, how low they are, and what the general public have come to accept as what's normal. And without these things, how are we supposed to be a community? Where are we supposed to go and meet if we're not in public spaces owned and maintained by local authorities? Where are we going to take our families for 3 days out? Where are we going to take kids for swimming lessons? Are we just going to pay to go to the pools all the time, to private companies? Are we just going to continue this trend of criminally underfunding what I view, and a lot of people view, as vital resources? Then there's not going to be such thing as society. It's not this administration's nor the last's fault. It's the government's fault. It's the Conservative government. It's the Liberal Conservative coalition government. It's the Labour government. It's all of them who, over the last 15 plus years, have taken away the ability to fund them, and in turn, the ability of our residents to view them as not just important, but something to be proud of. Therefore, I can't support this budget, as it's tantamount to supporting the ongoing system of austerity an asset stripping from the council and local authorities, not just here but across the country. And it's taken away the things that the residents of BCP should be enjoying and should come to accept as normal and being provided, and they are not, and we are not able to do so as councillors, as administrations, as people sat here in this room. We need radical change, and that needs to come from here and lobbying government and saying what we're doing. The Labour group next to me, you're in government now, please lobby your MPs to get us more funding, but not just getting more funding, how we've continued to do it. Like I say, radical change. We've seen over the last years the biggest wealth transfer from poor to rich in history. And what we need is complete tax reform, not just increasing council taxes, not just sticking the general taxation in the way that it is. We need land taxes, wealth taxes. We need ways to bring back into public ownership the things that are our rights and we should have. So that's the reason I can't support this budget, because I don't believe that this system is meeting the needs of residents of BCP and further afield anymore. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Rigby. Pool Engage Group are not represented tonight, so I can call on the Chairman of the Overview and Scrutiny Board, who is Councillor Stephen Bartlett. You have 5 minutes if you wish to speak.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was slightly surprised to see my name on the list this afternoon, so I'll have just a couple of words. First of all, I'd like to thank Councillor Cox and the way he articulated all the problems that we face as a council in this budget. I think he summarised all the arguments very, very well. Mention about the budget process itself. Last year we had a lot of negative criticism about the process itself, and this year, through the efforts of Democratic Services and Lindley Marshall in particular, in pioneering a new, more open, more lengthy scrutiny of the budget issues, going back several months, and everybody's had an opportunity to actually input into the budget process. I think that's worked well. Needs some further refinement, which we'll work on for next year, but thank you very much for Democratic Services. Councillor Canavan mentioned ambition. It's really difficult, given the financial situation that we're in, to actually express any real ambition, isn't it? What choices do we really have? But one choice that I would like to just touch on, and that was one mentioned in the Financial Director's report, where he talks about one of the only options available, not quite in those words, was that we can spend to the limit on send of what the government give us. That is, it was in the report. So we do actually have a choice, do we, of spending to that limit and not having to borrow that money. It's a conundrum. I put it to you that actually that isn't really a choice, because we have an obligation to support our children and all the good things that have happened in children's services, resulting in this great news of a good inspection report from Ofsted. Fantastic achievement. We can't possibly move back from that, can we, by not fulfilling, obligations under SEND. Just one last, the Financial Director's report, the Section 25 report, is probably the most important section of the whole budget report, where it lists all the risks, and it's not just the SEND. There are other risks, and any one of those is enough to take us over the edge, where our reserves will not support us. And of course, the thing is, this is our responsibility. It's not Financial Director's budget, it's ours. And we take that risk on behalf of our residents. This is a huge amount of money that we're going to commit to borrowing. And I go back now several years, maybe 9 years, 10 years, when I remember Bournemouth Borough Council opened a special reserve of £3 million to support send overspend. And it's grown and grown and grown exponentially to the situation where we're £108 million overdrawn on deficit this year. Frankly, I don't have the confidence in the government to sort that out, because I'm just, almost blasé about it. It's just more words that we've heard for years and years. So, but what choices do we have? Actually, we don't have any choices really here, do we? The choice is just too difficult to imagine if we took up the option in the budget paper. So, as ONS did, they supported, well, they didn't support it, they didn't make any comments, really. There was nothing in the budget paper that was contended by overview and scrutiny. but we did really understand that it was a massive risk that we're all taking on board on behalf of our residents. We really need to understand what that risk is. That's all. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Bartlett. Now we open it to the floor. Councillors, you have 3 minutes to speak if you wish. So I've got Councillor Moore first, I think.
Thank you, Chair. Well, what hasn't been mentioned tonight is in addition to SEN problems, funding social care takes the largest slice of this council's budget. Of course, social care is a totally essential service. However, when a council must fund care packages costing over £1 million for one person, I really don't think council tax was actually designed to pay for costs like this. The funding of social care is, of course, a government problem which urgently needs to be addressed. But the good news locally, as we've heard, is children's services being transformed and now Ofsted rated good. We have massively reduced the number of homeless in B&Bs. Working with partners, we've been able to help accommodate a large number of rough sleepers and made improvements to SWEP. In addition, we now have a play strategy providing a huge opportunity for the most significant investment in play in over 10 years. And it was approved by this council last December, a month before attempts were made to muscle in on all our hard work. And I need to give a shout out to all the teams in communities who are working their socks off supporting partner agencies to administer the Housing Support Fund and help mitigate against problems for our residents caused by the cost of living increases and the limitations on the winter fuel allowance. Agencies like Citizen Advice, Community Action Network, Family Information Service, Access to Food Partnership, and the list goes on, because we have many staff working very hard to provide services many residents don't even know exist. That is, until they need them. These are our unsung heroes and deserve our thanks. So, contrary to predictions from certain quarters, BCP Council did not go bust, has made some good improvements to essential services, and we have set a balanced budget providing a financially sound basis for the future. And I will be supporting this budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor David Martin, I believe.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. It would be remiss of me as a member on the Children's ONS Committee to not take the opportunity to publicly congratulate Cathy Hadley and all the team, everyone associated in delivering better children's services. As I'm sure you'll all be aware that the most recent ILACS inspection, and I quote, found a positively transformed service unrecognisable from that found in 2021. Still, I know the Council recognises more to be done, but this is a huge achievement by all involved. To the budget, I thank the portfolio holder, Councillor Cox, Adam Richards, all the team that have been involved in delivering another balanced budget, fiscally responsible. I know it's not necessarily the boldest, not necessarily shifting up loads of gears, but we are somewhat hamstrung by Councillor Rigby's comments. I echo around the consistent underfunding since 2010. I believe the local government association estimates something like £25 billion worth of service cuts. So no wonder we struggle year on, year out to deliver what are essential or should be expected as quality basic services, like having your bin collected on time or having potholes fixed or, clean streets, the basic services. The fact is that residents understandably see their own financial budgets, pressures being squeezed, and at the same time get a sense that our local areas are not in keeping with what they feel they're paying to get those basic services. But I also think it's crucial that the residents understand, because of these service cuts, tough decisions have to be made, and that, based on the amount that we are obligated, as quite rightly we should be supporting with adult and children's social care responsibilities. So I just want to say that it's not the easiest to have done, and particularly with this £60 million that we have had to, as Councillor Bartlett says, it's really something that we have to go into. But I'm pleased and I'm proud that this administration has stood up for itself to the government, has not accepted the deal that was proposed, has pushed back and pushed back again to make sure that we have had our clear input as to how and what we've accepted, or how we've accepted some of the terms that we've had with this loan. So I will be supporting the budget, and thanks to all for your hard work.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillor Hadley.
Thank you, Chair. Last year we had to make some really difficult choices about the services across the council that the public rely on us for. And as the top-tier council across England, the failure by successive national governments to grasp the nettle and to fix our structural problems of funding demands have given us real problems. The squeeze is still with us this year, and although the government promises to fix the DSG, the increases in national insurance employers' contributions and the minimum wage increases, which are great for those staff, took our budget, which we thought we had balanced, right back to the brink. It's no mean feat for Councillor Cox, with our Finance Director, Mr Richards, and the senior staff right across the Council, to find further savings, to keep services running as well as we can, whilst we all take the constant criticism of how we are apparently running the towns into the ground, including from councillors who had a lot of time in power to make it better. When I go elsewhere, I sadly see potholes, weeds, closed shops, and lack of means to maintain the public realm as we would all like. Often it seems far worse than it is locally, and I salute our teams, but also the resilience of the business owners locally who are reinventing their offers post-COVID and are dealing with the tendency towards online internet purchasing. Councillor Rigby highlighted the asset stripping on an industrial scale, and I agree with him. It's shocking how some people have taken the opportunity to make a mint from COVID, from conflict and from misery, and we are here to pick up the pieces and concentrate our limited resources on the most vulnerable. In Iceland, they locked up the casino bankers. Here they get knighthoods and lordships. I want to pay tribute to the work of our services in sustainable transport, in coastal and flood work, in climate change and environment for their efforts in attracting grants and capital opportunities. I think those areas do show ambition and long-term vision in maintaining facilities, and particularly thinking about our shared spaces, often with a 100-year forward vision. I wish we could be bolder and deliver more. We need the Labour government to support us in doing that and not trying to out-reform reform. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hadley. Councillor Phipps, you indicated.
Thank you, Chairman. First, I would also like to say how much time and effort has gone into this. We all know how much time and effort has gone in putting together this budget in very, very difficult financial circumstances. But for me, as I said before, the biggest issue is the DSG deficit. And looking at the Section 15 Officer's report, I'd just like to mention a few points from it. Steve did beat me to it on one of them. But paragraph 33 does say negotiations with the government are ongoing, and we have heard from Mike on that. But paragraph 34 says that the only other real option open to the Council to set a legally balanced budget for 25-26 would be to reduce the SEND expenditure to be in line with the government high needs grant allocation. And personally, I'd like to see us do just that. Paragraph 16 states that the Council's position presents a clear and dangerous position for the Council and its future sustainability. In March 25, the deficit will be 108 million, and in March 26, if we take this 60 million loan, which apparently we have no choice but to do, it'll be 166 million. This is just absolutely ridiculous. The government know that in order to provide the SEND service, we'll have to borrow 60 million. Why should we have to do this? Surely we could use the funds allocated to us and basically refer anything over the top of that directly to our MPs and back to the government. How can we spend money we haven't got? Are we on some sort of bankruptcy suicide mission or what? We're told that we have no choice. And we are expected to put this council in even more debt to the tune of 166 million by next year on a so-called vague promise from the government that they will be setting out their position on the situation in 2025. Well, so far, in my view, This government has already lied to the public on many fundamental issues, and I personally do not trust them to correct this situation, especially with their current self-inflicted downturn in the national economy. There is no money now, and there won't be any next year either. We're just being lumbered with more debt that we can't afford. Such a terrible situation to be in, not one of our own making. So I'm going to have to make my mind up what to do, but at the moment I feel very, very conflicted on this. Such a risk, as has been said, for this council, and I just don't like it at all.
Councillor Joe Salmon, I think you indicate.
Yeah, so I was interested in what Mike said when he introduced the budget, because he said this was a Conservative budget, which I don't think is fair. I don't think it's a Free Towns budget either, though. I think this is a Labour budget. You know, this is the budget the government have forced us to set. This is a continued austerity budget. Does what we're expecting Labour to do, you know, based on their months in power now, doesn't impose any inconvenience on the super rich, the very, very wealthy, the parasites who are making our society, our economy so unpalatable and unworkable, and instead means that we're going to have to whack up council tax by the maximum possible, all of that stuff, all of the stuff Labour would promise they wouldn't do. Now, I think really we've got two very clear choices in front of us. We either support this budget and accept the continued decline of our economy, our country and so forth, and more environmental destruction, because, to be fair to the administration, they've done what they can, but the money's not there to sort out the problems we face. There is no way you can take the constraints that this council is asked to operate under, or within, whatever you want to say, and we can sort out the problems we've got with antisocial behaviour, with crime, with homelessness, with public services failing. We just can't do that. Now, the only other option, if we're not going to support that budget, is really to do something radical. It's to go, we reject this budget, we're going to see what legal grey areas we're happy to enter into. Let's withhold the business rates, you know. Let's dare central government to go, okay, bring it on, you know. What are you going to do? If we don't conform to your rules and regulations, our armed guard's going to burst into his chamber and arrest us all, you know. Now, I tell you what, I'm kind of up for that, but I tell you what, the political will isn't here in this room to take on Westminster, which is what we really have to do. If we want to sort out the problems we face, we've got to use a Trumpism, drain that swamp of all the horrible career politicians who are up there ruining our lives, ruining our communities and whatnot. And if we're not going to do that, if we're not going to reject this budget, present company accepted. Present company accepted. But if we're not going to do that, we haven't got any alternative ideas to this budget. No one's come up with any serious proposals. I think we just accept that there's nothing here to discuss, and we are just here to witness the decline of our society. And it's sad. There's nothing more to say than that. I'm up for voting against the rest of you are, but I don't think we can do that, can we? So I think we should just get on and pass it.
Councillor Trent, I believe you're next.
Thank you, Chair. I have to say that the biggest list I've got to do with this budget or any other recent budget is the list of things that we can't do any longer. But what I have to say is I am relieved that it's not as awful as previous budgets have been. Things have stabilised, and I very much appreciate that and all the work that's gone into stabilising it. I do hope that the government does honour their word and sort out the special education needs, etc., and not only sort out the financial side, but actually sort out the legislation, which I think has made the matter worse than it could be. The other thing I'm rather looking forward to is that I was told last week at another meeting that the government is supposed to be having a report coming out in the summer to do with supporting our young people. And I think one of the biggest problems we've got, and one of the biggest cost drains we've got, comes as a result of dysfunctionality in families and individuals and so on. And I think anything we can do for our younger people, and unfortunately we do need support from the government to do this, that actually helps prevent people becoming dysfunctional as their life proceeds, would be great. And so I support this budget, but I do think that we need to be talking to our MPs and working with our MPs to try to make things better and to look at things long term, not just what gets over the next crisis. I think we need to have a long term plan to put the community right.
Thank you, Councillor Trent. Councillor David Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Just a few points I wanted to make, because a lot been covered already. I do want to actually pick up a bit what Councillor Canavan said and welcome the overview and scrutiny involvement in the budget and the real constructive sort of challenge and constructive input about finding savings and actually the sort of real thought that went into some of those suggestions that came from overview and scrutiny. So I really sort of welcome that as a positive development this year. Having been involved throughout the sort of budget process, you know, things were looking quite good, but for me, it's when you look at the report, paragraphs 4 and 5 talk about the changes in the 6.7% increase in national living wage and the increase in employers' national insurance. And those two bits together, it talks about the £11.5 million additional cost that's creating for the council. And that just, for me, overshadows all of the budget, really, because that takes almost all of the council tax increase. A lot of residents say to me, and I read that, you know, why are we asking for a 4.99% council tax increase and will services improve with that? Well, most of it will be sucked up by the national insurance costs and the increase in national living wage. But despite that, you know, I think, and colleagues have mentioned, particularly Councillor Moore mentioned, the amazing improvements we've had in children's social care and the good Ofsted report, in housing with families not being in bed and breakfast accommodation now, the play strategy delivering £3 million investment in our play areas, and our finances in the finance area just to got back to stable, balanced, prudent finances is a real achievement, I think. And in my own area of health and wellbeing and adult social care, you won't see that many lines in the savings bit against adult social care, because it's not the sort of area where say, well, we'll cut spending we're doing on this, we'll cut that, we'll cut this. To really, adult social care, we're delivering our statutory services, we're delivering them to increasing numbers of people, and a lot of those people have got really increasingly complex and demanding needs, which cost even more. But it's not a case of cutting things to do that. It's a case of managing the care system, and actually the way we're managing that is actually by making strategic changes to manage that care system with our extra care housing strategy, our day opportunity strategy, our adult social care transformation, and our future care work with Newton, working with our health partners to really transform the way we work with the health service locally. So that's the way we're managing the pressures within adult social care and within health and wellbeing, as well as all the work going on in public health. So really I just wanted to say that despite really difficult financial situation and really difficult decisions having to be made, this Three Towns Alliance is not only managing those pressures, but it's still managing to deliver some outstanding achievements, and I'm really proud of that.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Vicky Slade.
Thank you, Chair. I just really want to make a couple of comments directly at a couple of people who have spoken. First of all, to Councillor Salmon. I don't know whether you heard Parliament today, but Lee Anderson basically asked about whether white coats needed to be sent in. And I just wonder whether, if people heard what you had suggested, we might end up with the white coats in here as well. Because as much as I would love to support this idea, as I think Councillor Cox has indicated, we have to sign off a budget, otherwise we'll lose our general power of competence, and none of us here signed up to pass all our powers over to government. We have some of them, but not all of them. So I would love to support you and go out with my pitchfork, but I think we have to do the best that we can. A message to Councillor Phipps. I had to speak when I heard you suggest that we just reduce our SEND deficit. And I have to say, that to do that would directly impact some of the most vulnerable children in BCP. And I think if the families affected heard you suggest that that was even an option, they would be devastated, they would be terrified. Their special educational needs, their EHCPs that their children rely on is what's holding some of these families together. And so I think it's really disappointing to hear somebody who is a lead member for this council even suggest that we do that. The stranglehold that some of the multi-academy trusts have got on council funding right now, forcing children out and pushing them onto the council for the council to pick up the pieces is truly shameful. And I'm hoping that the new Children's Wellbeing and Schools Bill will actually give powers back to the councils so we can start building schools, but it's going to take time. I have the confidence the government have put this in writing, and as the Lib Dems spokesperson for MHCLG, for homes, communities and local government, I know the sector's in complete crisis. You know, I'm hearing it every day. I'm talking to my colleagues who have got much bigger problems than we have. Now, I am no apologist for this government. I do not represent them. But I will say that I do think that the minister in charge gets it. He's been a council leader. He's promised he will sort this out. And I think we have got to give them the time to do it. So as much as I don't want to be speaking positively about them, I am a proud member of the opposition and I will speak up whenever I can. But we have got to just ride this for another year and give them the time to get to the multi-year settlements and hope that this time next year we don't have to get our pitchforks out alongside Councillor Salmon.
Thank you, Councillor Slade. Councillor Aikenhead.
Thank you. I will be opposing the budget, but the reason I'll be opposing it is because what I really want to see is some more vision behind the budget. So it's not the detail, it's the overall picture. And one thing particularly, we are 3 towns. We are led by the 3 Towns Alliance. And what I want to see is a vision that recognises that we are 3 towns and not just one entity. So that vision would be different than other councils would have. There's something unique about us. And I want to see that behind the budget. But I would like to say, even though I'm not voting for it, it's not really my budget, but it's not all that bad. Okay, the budget could be worse. We could be scrapping climate action and decreasing parking charges, for instance. And it's really important that we don't try and blame others all the time. Yes, sure, some others are to blame for the problems that we've had, but there's things that we can look at and realise that some of those problems are problems that we made for ourselves. Some people have mentioned the minimum wage being one thing that's been a problem for us, that rise in the minimum wage. And I think I have to ask myself, exactly what role amongst people who work for us in BCP is only worth enough for us to be paying them so little? Why are we even paying someone the minimum wage? And when we get a chance to do this, is there some way that we can make sure what we're paying is much more of a living wage than a minimum wage? So somebody mentioned that all the governments are to blame. The Labour government, the Liberal Democrats and the Tories, the Tory government. But actually, I think we have to say that most of the problem we're in was the Conservative government. 14 years of cuts to local government. Every year, cut more and more. Responsibilities piled on and no money for those responsibilities. And how can we expect a Labour government in 1 year to correct all those things? So as Councillor Slade said, you need to give the government some time. Yes, look at us and tell us to lobby. We're doing it. We are lobbying for this council. We want this council to succeed. So we know that the Conservative government was to blame for where we are. But now, from now on, we need to move forward and make sure that we are all working together for BCP.
Thank you, Councillor Aikenhead. Councillor Burton, I think you indicated.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And a few thanks. I would like to thank, as a lot of people have done, Mike and Adam and the team, because I know the amount of work that's gone into this budget. I'd also like to thank everybody who's mentioned children and young people in this debate. I feel that my job is done here because we're talking about it, aren't we? It's something which everybody knows is an issue. I often feel that at this point that I ought to apologise because of this deficit for the children, the high needs deficit. I'm not going to. And one thing I do worry about, and I resent to a certain extent, is to feel that children are being blamed here, because it isn't the children and young people's fault. It is, the high needs block deficit, it's their entitlement. It is what is down in statute that we have to provide as a service for them. And if they have those needs, and we have to provide it. The idea of withholding that, I think, is a huge worry. Now, I do agree that the system is broken. I am holding a certain amount of trust in the current government to actually have a look and sort it. I might be being naive, I don't know, but they say they're going to look at it. And until that time, we just have to wait until that fix comes. I also would say that those people who are saying, look, we're not going to support this budget, give us an alternative. There's lots of things I've heard said here today that, I'll be up for that, increasing wages of people who work for us. However, we need a budget in front of us that we can look at, we can debate, and decide whether that's a better budget than the one that we're presenting. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Burton. I now have Councillor Adams. Thank you.
I'm ready. I was only to say that I actually feel really sorry for you guys. I can't imagine how difficult it is to write a budget. I have neither the time, ability or inclination to. And obviously we've spent the last year being told that things can only get better. When? Yeah, whatever, blame the last government, but the first opportunity you had hasn't actually made things better. It's made it worse. We were promised by the new Labour government that we'd get a council tax freeze. Oh, and the letter, the leaflet I have in this envelope tells me it was a fully funded promise, so it was guaranteed, but I guess that was a lie. That was before the lies about protecting the pensioners and before the other lie about cutting my fuel bills by 300 quid. Not only that, but there's an 11 million increase in the costs imposed by this Labour government in their national insurance hikes that have not been fully met by government funding. So I'm very sorry, it is a difficult situation. And obviously next year we're going to have to deal with any huge cuts in business rate funding from those businesses, such as Bills, who can't afford the challenging tax hikes and will have to close. In the context of those lies, I'm not entirely optimistic that all the solutions will be coming just next year. We're already skint, and now we're in the territory of needing Lenny Henry to come in and do a comic relief to get us a bit of cash. You mentioned your massive mandate in the last speech, and the only thing I do remember was the residence card, and I'm still convinced it's a great idea, and I don't know if I did mishear, but I think and hope Councillor Cox said it included discounts for things like parking charges, which I hope our lot would support, even if half of your guys don't care that they're too damn high. You promised us it all in your literature, so where is it? You say it's coming, but you said that last year, the year before that, and in the election before that. I really, really hope you do it. I will support it and be your biggest cheerleader, so that's my priority. Give the residents a discount on something.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hannah.
Thank you. Could I echo the appreciation to Mr. Richards and his team for all the work that's gone into this budget. As it happens, this is my 22nd budget debate. I've been a councillor in 2 other councillors before BCP. And I just wanted to reflect the level of opposition in this debate is possibly the poorest that I have heard in those 22 years of being a councillor. It has been virtually empty and vacuous. Nothing much has been said in terms of alternative budgets, alternative approaches to expenditure. If the best that we can do as opposition is to say, let's try to save £1 on parking, and that's it. If there's no list of political priorities set out in terms of an alternative budget, and I've seen lists that have gone on to 2, 3, 4 A4 pages all carefully costed. If no opposition party can put something like that together, then my only conclusion is, Mike, Councillor Cox, you've done a pretty good job. Congratulations on that. I also hear that we're not being sufficiently ambitious, that there's a lack of vision. And I would put that challenge back to the Labour councillors who've expressed that. Can you please evidence your own ambition and vision when it comes to a budget? Not simply when it comes to, can we please talk up the 3 towns? But in context of a budget debate, you set out your ambition and vision by proposing alternatives. You don't just throw 2 words out, ambition and vision. That is what I mean by saying the opposition is vacuous. The other comment I make to the Labour group in particular is we have been debating at different stages the difficulties that we have with SEND, the borrowing that some councillors were hesitant to support, but that's critically needed. And it's critically needed because the Labour government have not resolved the issue that the Conservative government created. It's not a new issue. Labour has known about the problem, not just for this council, but for all councils, for years. Please get your government to come up with a sensible proposal to solve it. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
What was that?
Councillor Farr is the last one.
Yes, I know.
Councillor Farr.
Who's the one with the hand up now?
Councillor Armstrong.
Now I have Councillor Farr, and then I believe Councillor Armstrong, and then we'll ask Councillor Cox to sum up. So Councillor Farr.
Within the budget, there are announced cuts as part of the longer budget term for funding for certain bus routes. This would likely include 36 service being threatened, which is depended on by many Kinston and West Howe residents, which I represent. I read today that there's a national government target to double bus passenger usage by 2035. So I'm left wondering how on earth it fits with this target. Thank you.
Councillor Armstrong, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to come back actually on some of the comments that have been made with regards to young people and vulnerable people in our society, because I'm very worried for the next generation and the kind of legacy that we are leaving for young people in our community. This, I want to say most emphatically, this is not their fault. In fact, it's clearly the fault of some of the adults in the room who've allowed the marketisation of health and social care and education to carry on, that have allowed providers to go uncapped with their pricing schedules and profiteer on the back of providing care and education for vulnerable people. And I think it needs to stop. We are seeing that the people who are providing the care and the services, they're on minimum wage. They're not living it up. And yet the providers, many of which have got offshore bank accounts and are very wealthy, are the ones who are cashing in. And unless we stop that, this situation is just going to continue. And I think we're doing a massive disservice to our young people if we don't. And I hear what we're saying about pitchforks. I'll be out there as well with a pitchfork if we can't solve this.
Thank you, councillors. Now I'm going to ask Councillor Cox to sum up the substantive debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, I'll try and sum up. There's a lot of. I want to thank everybody for their contributions, and actually thank everybody for their kind words that were said. But I just wanted to pick up on a few of the points that were made, particularly Councillor Canavan. You know, you talk about the lack of ideas and lack of ambition, but as Councillor Hannah has already said, Where's your alternative? If you have ideas, I want to know about them, because I'll be happy to incorporate them. You know, if you have an ambition, let me know what it is, because I'll be happy to talk about it and happy to incorporate it. So please don't vote against this because you say there's no lack of ideas or ambition. Then if you have them, then put them forward, and then you can vote against it. But you have no right at the moment to vote against it, and you do have a legal responsibility. You do have a legal responsibility to vote against. You have a legal responsibility to vote for a budget. You can vote against it, but it'd be irresponsible if you did. Councillor Rigby, you said it's a good job and there was good consultation, so thank you for that. You said that all savings, you know, there was £80 million worth of savings and it's constant and relentless. I agree, it is constant and relentless, but I would say that not all of those savings are cuts. A lot of them are increased charges, they're efficiencies, and efficiencies are not cuts. And therefore, and it's a constant programme of efficiency savings that all organisations have to go through. Councillor Bartlett and Councillor Phipps, you know, believe you me, I agree with you on so much of what you've said, because you know you're right. You know, this is unsustainable, and I do have some sympathy for Margaret's position, but I am not prepared. I am not prepared to put children at risk for a political point. And if we are going to make a political point, then there's a very easy way to do it, and that's to withhold business rates. That's what hurts the government most. And if we're going to do something dramatic like that, then we should do that. But at the moment, I'll go along with the consensus that we should actually agree with go along with the government's recommendations to do the borrowing. But if they don't come up trumps, and I suspect, like you, that they may not, then let's do something dramatic then. Not necessarily pitchforks, but maybe the financial equivalent of pitchforks. Councillor Salmon, you've called this a Labour budget, and I think you are promoting anarchy, effectively. No, you may be an anarchist, but I'm not. I'm an accountant, and I'm a fairly prudent accountant at best. So, and I am not Derek Hatton. So I'm afraid I can't go along with your suggestions. I think Councillor Trent called this not as bad as it could have been. Well, that's talk about being damned with faint praise. You know, Councillor Aikenhead, I think you said the same thing as Councillor Canavan in different words. You know, if you want to help, then you should be lobbying. You should be lobbying your MPs. But at the moment, you have failed. You have failed to lobby those MPs, or those MPs have failed. Those MPs have. What I'm saying is, those MPs have failed to actually come up with the promise that the minister said. The minister promised that we would be fully refunded. We weren't. We are over £2 million short. Now, where is it? If you want to come up with it, then that's fine. You should have actually put forward a suggestion.
Councillor Cox, you're well over your time. Can you wind up?
I beg your pardon. I'll stop there then. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. Members, we're now going to the vote. I'm sorry, Councillor Salmon, why are you standing up?
So I just wanted to raise a point of order under 14.17. I think that's the right bit. We've had a few times now where people have been heckled where they're speaking. It's not a football match. Could we all not shout when the other members are speaking? I know it's really witty banter, but could we not do that?
Thank you, Councillor Salmon. I haven't actually heard it because of my cold, so thank you for pointing that out. Members, now, it's the minute 112, Budget 2025-26, Medium-Term Financial Plan, on which we are voting with a recorded vote. So I'll hand over to the Chief Executive.
Thank you, Chairman. So it's a vote on the budget. If you're in favour of the budget, please vote for. So starting with Councillor Cameron Adams.
Against.
Councillor Sue Aikenhead.
Against.
Councillor Hazel Allen.
Against.
Councillor Marcus Andrews. Sorry.
For.
Councillor Sarah Armstrong.
Abstain.
Councillor Stephen Bartlett.
For.
Councillor John Beasley.
Against.
Councillor Philip Broadhead.
Against.
Councillor David Brown.
For.
Councillor Olivia Brown.
For.
Councillor Simon Bull.
Abstain.
Councillor Richard Burton.
For.
Councillor Patrick Canavan.
Against.
Councillor Sharon Carl-Brown.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Adrian Chapman-Law.
For.
Councillor Brian Chick.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Eleanor Connolly.
Against.
Councillor Peter Cooper.
Against.
Councillor Mike Cox.
For.
Councillor Leslie Dedman.
For.
Thank you. Councillor David Dorton Gibson.
Against.
Councillor Bobby Dove.
Against.
Councillor Michelle Dower. Councillor Millie Earle.
For.
Councillor Jackie Edwards. Councillor Dwayne Farr.
Against.
Councillor David Flagg. Councillor Matthew Gillett.
For.
Councillor Crispin Goodall.
For.
Councillor Andy Hadley.
For.
Councillor Jeff Hanna. Councillor Emily Harman.
For.
Councillor Richard Herrett. Thank you. Councillor Alistair Keddy.
Abstain.
Councillor Marion Le Pedevin.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Sandra Macro.
For.
Councillor Andy Martin. Councillor David Martin. Councillor Gillian Martin.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Jamie Martin. Councillor Chris Matthews.
For.
Councillor Simon McCormack. Councillor Sandra Moore. Councillor Anne-Marie Moriarty.
Against.
Okay. Councillor Bernadette Nanovo.
For.
Councillor Lisa Northover.
For.
Councillor Rachel Pattinson West.
For.
Councillor Margaret Phipps. Councillor Karen Rampton. Councillor Felicity Rice.
For.
Councillor Vanessa Ricketts. Councillor Chris Rigby.
Abstain.
Thank you. Councillor Joe Salmon.
Abstain.
Councillor Kate Salmon.
Abstain.
Councillor Peter Sidaway.
For.
Councillor Paul Slade.
For.
Councillor Toby Slade. Councillor Vicky Slade.
For.
Councillor Michael Tarling.
For.
Councillor Tony Trent.
For.
Councillor Oliver Waters.
For.
Councillor Claire Waite.
For.
Councillor Kieran Wilson.
For.
And Councillor Gavin Wright. Thank you, councillors.
Members, there is one more item before you go. Councillor Salmon. Members, the result of that was 39 for, 19 against and 6 abstentions, so that is carried. Thank you. So we'll move on quickly to item 9, 2025 to 26, the council tax resolution. Councillor Mike Cox, I understand you're going to move the recommendation and Councillor Millie Earle will second. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This is a separate report which says that we have to set the council tax at 4.99. It's done separately this time as opposed to before because it's recommended. So I hereby move that we set the council tax at 4.99%. Thank you.
Councillor Earle.
Happy to second that one.
Members, is there any debate before we go to the vote? Thank you. This is another recorded vote. Thank you.
Apologies. Okay, councillors, recorded vote, as you just heard. So, Councillor Cameron Adams.
Against.
Councillor Sue Aikenhead.
For.
Councillor Hazel Allen.
Against.
Councillor Marcus Andrews.
For.
Councillor Sarah Armstrong.
Abstain.
Councillor Stephen Bartlett.
For.
Councillor John Beasley.
Against.
Councillor Philip Broadhead.
Against.
Councillor David Brown.
For.
Councillor Olivia Brown.
For.
Councillor Simon Bull.
Abstain.
Councillor Richard Burton.
For.
Councillor Patrick Canavan.
For.
Councillor Sharon Carr-Brown.
For.
Councillor Adrian Chapman-Law.
For.
Councillor Brian Chick.
For.
Councillor Eleanor Connolly.
For.
Councillor Peter Cooper.
For.
Councillor Mike Cox.
For.
Councillor Leslie Dedman.
For.
Councillor David Dalton-Gibson.
Against.
Councillor Bobby Dove.
Against.
Councillor Michelle Dower.
For.
Councillor Millie Earle.
For.
Councillor Jackie Edwards. Councillor Dwayne Farr.
Against.
Councillor David Flagg. Councillor Matthew Gillett.
For.
Councillor Crispin Goodall.
For.
Councillor Andy Hadley.
For.
Councillor Jeff Hanna. Councillor Emily Harman. And Councillor Richard Herrett. Thank you. Councillor Alistair Keddy.
Abstain.
Councillor Marion Lepidovin.
For.
Councillor Sandra Macro.
For.
Councillor Andy Martin. Councillor David Martin. Councillor Gillian Martin.
For.
Councillor Jamie Martin. Councillor Chris Matthews.
For.
Councillor Simon McCormack. Councillor Sandra Moore. Councillor Anne-Marie Moriarty.
For.
Councillor Bernadette Nanovo.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Lisa Northover. Councillor Rachel Patterson-West.
For.
Councillor Margaret Phipps. Councillor Karen Rampton. Thank you. Councillor Felicity Rice.
For.
Councillor Vanessa Ricketts. Councillor Chris Rigby.
Abstain.
Councillor Peter Sidaway.
For.
Sorry, Councillor Joe Salmon.
Abstain.
Thank you. Councillor Paul Slade. Councillor Toby Slade. Thank you. Councillor Vicky Slade.
For.
Councillor Michael Tarling. Councillor Tony Trent.
For.
Councillor Oliver Waters.
For.
Councillor Claire Waite.
For.
Councillor Kieran Wilson. And Councillor Gavin Wright. Thank you, councillors.
Thank you, members. So that was 48 for, 9 against and 6 abstentions. So that was carried. Thank you very much, members, for a very good meeting, and we're closed.